Chapter 1766. The backup plan Bai Xiaowen mentioned was mainly targeted at the Dark Age plane. With Bai Xiaowen presiding over it, the Western continent would naturally be very stable. However, Bai Xiaowen was leaving this time with a large number of elite troops, so the power of the new City of Silver would definitely weaken. How to ensure the stability of the Western continent while Bai Xiaowen was focused on the Star Alliance's affairs and continuously transfuse blood to the White Phoenix Dominion was an important problem that Bai Xiaowen had to solve. Isman's God-Fiend Corps couldn't be taken out of this plane. Otherwise, it would cause the demons to be expelled and unable to continue existing in this plane. However, leaving the God-Fiend Corps in this plane was also more dangerous. This was because Rosher had pinched his nose and negotiated with Bai Xiaowen, and Bai Xiaowen's main bargaining chip was this God-Fiend Corps. After Bai Xiaowen left, if Rosher had the intention to snatch the God-Fiend Corps, the new City of Silver's remaining strength wouldn't be able to stop him. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen spent some time to set up an inner and outer immortal array in the new City of Silver. The inner immortal array was a type of concealment array that protected the altar where the God-Fiend Corps was located. This small immortal array could isolate the aura of the God-Fiend Corps. The outer immortal array was a large maze array that protected the entire new City of Silver. Bai Xiaowen recalled the three heavenly kings and their undead troops. He told Sid Delifa the way to pass through the outer immortal array and handed over the defense of the new City of Silver to her. Then, Bai Xiaowen summoned the King of Pride, Aliganti. Now that Aliganti saw Bai Xiaowen, he could clearly sense the change in her attitude. There was an additional layer of respect compared to before. The reason was very simple. Bai Xiaowen had killed the King of Pain, Sulfuron, alone. Originally, Aliganti and Sulfuron had thought that Bai Xiaowen had only relied on his ability to command an army to defeat a Demon King-level powerhouse. But now, Bai Xiaowen had proven that his personal strength was equally powerful. He had the strength to tear a Demon King apart with his bare hands. This shocked Aliganti. "I want to leave this world. You have to come with me," Bai Xiaowen said in a deep voice. "All right." Aliganti understood that it was impossible for Bai Xiaowen to leave her in the new City of Silver at ease. If she refused, it might lead to a storm. Sulfuron's corpse had yet to turn cold, and she did not want to follow in his footsteps. From Bai Xiaowen's point of view, having a high-level king-class expert by his side would increase his combat strength. Of course, he knew that Aliganti didn't really want to submit to him. He just wanted to follow him and learn the way of leadership. He didn't rule out the possibility of betrayal. However, Bai Xiaowen was not worried. Aliganti was a demon king that specialized in mental attacks. With the Eye of Evolution, Bai Xiaowen was immune to many mental attacks. If Aliganti cast Charm or Soul Ren on Bai Xiaowen, he would be shooting himself in the foot. Bai Xiaowen also believed that he was sharp enough to discover Aliganti's betrayal in advance and counteract it. Han Su knew about this and quietly suggested that Bai Xiaowen kill Aliganti. Wouldn't that be the end of it? Bai Xiaowen refused with a smile. Now that the White Phoenix territory was facing many challenges, it wasn't the time to seek stability. Aliganti was very useful, and it would be a pity to kill him. In the new human kingdom, Bai Xiaowen also left a deployment to ensure that the human kingdom wouldn't leave his control. Then, Bai Xiaowen injected a new wave of death's power into the three heavenly kings. The three heavenly kings had previously received 10 points of death's power. Now that they were injected with a new wave of death's power, it wasn't to bestow them the position of the leader of their race, but purely to strengthen their strength. The three heavenly kings didn't disappoint Bai Xiaowen. They all survived the 50 points of death's power. Bai Xiaowen continued to increase the power until the three heavenly kings reached their limit before stopping. Among them, Delifa Sid was the strongest. He had received 91 points of death's power, and his strength was infinitely close to king level. The only flaw was that his priority was lacking by 1 point. Abaddon and Pudge's performance was about the same. They had both received around 80 points of death's power, and were also considered quasi-king level powerhouses. Bai Xiaowen took away all the 20,000 devil troops in the new City of Silver through the Resonance Teleportation Array. In the new city of silver, only the undead slave army was left. Delafa Sig, you will lead the undead army and maintain our rule in the western continent. Bai Xiaowen instructed, of the 2 remaining lesser demon kings in the Battle of the Ice Plains, I have already killed the king of pain, Sulfuron, and I will take away the king of pride, Aliganti. There's only one Rosher in the western continent who has the ability to threaten our rule. If Rosher breaks the agreement and attacks the new city of silver, withdraw your defenses and activate the maze to delay. Then, send someone to enter the territory through the resonance teleportation array to find me. Delafa Sig bowed and obeyed. Han Su followed beside Bai Xiaowen and looked at the mighty 20,000 devil troops, dumbfounded. This was because he discovered more than a dozen particularly powerful devils among the 20,000. He couldn't sense their strength at all. Without a doubt, they were at least at the level of an overlord. How many crystals is this combat power? Han Su asked. I haven't calculated it in detail. Roughly speaking, it's less than 1,000,000 crystals, Bai Xiaowen said. Han Su was completely speechless. Back then, Candace had divided the Star Alliance's territories into 7 grades, mainly based on the crystals of the territorial army's combat power. The Heavenly Province territory could only be considered a 4th-grade territory, with combat power above 10,000 crystals and below 30,000 crystals. Of course, as the Heavenly Province territory expanded the devil forces, its power increased greatly, and it might have been raised to the 3rd grade, which was a combat power above 30,000 crystals and below 100,000 crystals. However, Bai Xiaowen's 20,000 devil troops now had combat power close to 1,000,000 crystals. It was equivalent to the sum of 10 third-grade territories. Captain, you've caused too much trouble this time, Han Su said sincerely. The success of this strategy can't be replicated. The right time, the right place, and the right people are indispensable, Bai Xiaowen said. Oh right, do you have enough spirit crystals to let this 20,000 devil army belong to the White Phoenix territory? There was something to be said here. These 20,000 devils weren't White Phoenix territory's citizens yet. To let them belong to the White Phoenix territory, the devils needed to agree on their own, and Bai Xiaowen, the overlord, needed to fork out a large number of spirit crystals. Of course, the first condition was very simple. Which devil dared to disobey Bai Xiaowen? They were all willing. The second condition was a headache. Nearly half of the 20,000 devils were elites, and there were also a large number of leaders and devil overlords. A conservative estimate was about 5,000,000 spirit crystals to let them belong to the ranks of the White Phoenix territory's citizens. This was definitely an astronomical figure, but Bai Xiaowen wasn't spending his own money, so he didn't feel the pinch. After sweeping through the nests of a few devil kings, especially the treasury of the city of Silver Isman, Bai Xiaowen obtained a large number of resources, which were definitely worth more than 5,000,000 spirit crystals. Chapter 1767. Of course, the value of more than 5,000,000 here was in terms of the total amount of goods, not the number of spirit crystals that were readily available. The existing spirit crystals only accounted for about 1/10 of the total value, which was 580,000. If Bai Xiaowen wanted to cash in on the rest of the goods, he still needed to transport the goods to Star Alliance and sell them in a planned manner. Of course, it was also possible to directly hand them over. The rules of the spirit realm would also give spirit crystals according to the concentration of spirit energy particles contained in the goods, usually the grade. However, the valuation of the rules of the spirit realm was too conservative. It was equivalent to selling equipment directly to the shop in an online game. It was a loss. Moreover, there were many rare things in the collection of the Demon Kings. In the eyes of the discerning people in Star Alliance, they were priceless treasures, but they were worthless in front of the rules of the spirit realm. At that moment, Bai Xiaowen used the resonance teleportation array to transport the goods to White Phoenix territory. Han Su helped to transport the goods every time. Han Su worked for a full 4 hours before he finished transporting the goods. Bai Xiaowen used the 580,000 spirit crystals as cash to first turn a group of the strongest demons into his citizens. Among them was the King of Pride, Aliganti. Just her, a king-level demon, cost Bai Xiaowen 180,000 spirit crystals. There were also 13 demon lords, a large number of demon leaders, and so on. There was no need to go into detail. Bai Xiaowen had his considerations when he prioritized transporting the powerful demons. The stronger the demon, the more restless it would be. Once they caused trouble, the more trouble it would cause. Now, the strongest group of demons had been brought back to Star Alliance by Bai Xiaowen. The remaining few chief-level demons, as well as a large number of elite-level and ordinary-level demons, were generally more timid. Without a leader, they did not dare to rebel at will. Even if these demons rebelled, Delafa Sig, who was infinitely close to king level, led a large number of undead army and had the ability to counter them. This way, Bai Xiaowen would have plenty of time to sell the goods in Star Alliance in batches and earn enough spirit crystals. In the end, he would turn the 20,000 demon army into White Phoenix Territory's army. After everything was arranged, Bai Xiaowen and Han Su finally embarked on their return journey. After returning to the White Phoenix Territory, Bai Xiaowen first looked at the messages in the Blue Star Overlord group. Over the past month, the public chat area of the Lord group was filled with messages. Bai Xiaowen smelled the smell of gunpowder that was about to come. It was really an eventful time. The overall situation was similar to what Han Su and Qiao Rui had introduced. However, Bai Xiaowen noticed a new situation. "Sister Qiao, have you noticed a problem?" After Bai Xiaowen quickly browsed through the information records, he said slowly, "This time, Tianfu territory issued a war threat to us. Except for the Queen Bee of the Wuzhou territory, no other territory in the Pan-Asian Alliance came forward to mediate." Qiao Rui nodded. "I noticed. But what does this mean?" "Sister Qiao, you just joined the Overlord group not long ago, so you don't know Starlink's routine. Every territory wanted to show their peace-loving image. When two territories had a conflict, they would usually stand up and say a few words. This is the same as the political scene on Earth in the Christian era." Qiao Rui suddenly understood. Then this time is indeed abnormal. No one in the old territories of the Pan-Asian Alliance has come forward to say a word except for the Wuzhou territory. On the contrary, many lords of the old territories of the Divine Court and the World Illumination Society have come forward. The lords of the Divine Court and the World Illumination Society have come forward just to make their presence known. Whether or not a war breaks out between the Tianfu territory and the White Phoenix territory has nothing to do with them. Some territories can't wait for the war to start so that they can benefit from it. This is not the main point. The main point is the attitude of the Pan-Asian Alliance. I think maybe a high-ranking figure in the Pan-Asian Alliance has expressed his position." Bai Xiaowen said slowly, "Combined with the news of Xia Feng's disappearance, I always felt that something was wrong. Maybe this time, our real opponent is not the Tianfu territory." Qiao Rui took a breath and looked a little surprised. "If your guess is true, in the Pan-Asian Alliance, I'm afraid that only..." Bai Xiaowen raised his hand and stopped Qiao Rui. He said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. Although only a month has passed, the strength of our White Phoenix territory has ushered in a huge leap. No matter who the opponent is, I have the confidence to deal with it." Qiao Rui nodded gently with a complicated look on his face. He said with a smile, "I feel that your strength has begun to improve by leaps and bounds since returning from the dinosaur planet." Li Shi also said, "Yes, Xiaowen, you added 4 Lord-level summon creatures in one go. At that time, I felt that it was very abnormal. This time, after returning from the Dark Age, even the high-level king-level demons were subdued by you, not to mention so many demon lords and leaders. It's simply an exponential increase. We have been left far behind by you." Bai Xiaowen also felt that the sudden increase in his strength after returning from the dinosaur planet was like a dream. However, Bai Xiaowen's growth in strength had a deeper reason. He gradually felt that he was now on the road to becoming a god. The growth trajectory of a god was completely different from that of a human. The increase in strength at each stage was far from comparable to that of an ordinary hero or even a lord-level profession. All of this originated from the incomplete black book that appeared in his mind when he collected the bones of the Grim Reaper and obtained the power of the Grim Reaper. Without the power of the Grim Reaper, there would be no promotion of the 4 Heavenly Kings template. Without the Grim Reaper's countenance, there would be no way to become the savior of the Dark Age dimension and activate the Descendant of God side mission. Of course, although this path could make one's strength soar, it was by no means smooth sailing. Instead, it was full of challenges. One careless mistake in one would be smashed to pieces. For example, one would encounter king-level or even Descendant of God enemies in advance, or even become enemies with the mainstream factions of the entire dimension. Only Bai Xiaowen had survived this. If it had been any other awakened, who could have built such a shocking foundation from scratch in the Dark Age dimension and killed a Descendant of God? Now, Bai Xiaowen was only a level 16 lord on the surface, but in terms of individual strength and overall strength, he was not inferior to the big bosses of the Interstellar Alliance. Of course, the companions were not jealous of Bai Xiaowen's rapid progress. For example, Qiao Rui and Li Shi just felt a little disappointed. They felt that they could no longer help Bai Xiaowen. Han Su scratched his butt and coughed. I think it's a good thing that Captain has become a big boss of the Interstellar Alliance. Won't I be able to concentrate on my cultivation if I'm under Captain's protection? Qiao Rui, Li Shi, and Cecilia all laughed. Of course, they were even happier for Bai Xiaowen and felt a sense of relief in their hearts. With Bai Xiaowen's strength, of course, he could calmly face the grim situation of the Interstellar Alliance. Okay, Boss Xiaowen. What do you plan to do with the current situation? Li Shi asked. Chapter 1768. Yes. First, we need to declare our presence to Starlink, Bai Xiaowen said. Show off your muscles? Li Shi struck a bodybuilder pose. That's right, Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. We have a perfect target. In the Blue Star Overlords group chat. The originally quiet public chat area became lively due to one person's appearance. LV Wang, White Phoenix, Sky Mansion Overlord and Golden Stone Overlord blocked my teleportation portal on Dinosaur Planet. This is a serious provocation to White Phoenix Overlord's sovereignty. I hereby warn, Sky Mansion Overlord and, Golden Stone Overlord to stop provoking us as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will have to bear the consequences. As the saying went, a stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. A large number of overlords immediately sent private messages to Bai Xiaowen to inquire about Bai Xiaowen's gains in the Dark Age dimension. Bai Xiaowen's trip to the Dark Age dimension was a secret in itself. However, he had destroyed Sky Mansion Overlord's resonance teleportation portal in the Dark Age dimension. Sky Mansion Overlord had denounced him in the Overlord group chat. Therefore, the conflict between the two overlords in the Dark Age dimension was no longer a secret. Many well-informed overlords knew about it. Bai Xiaowen only chose the overlords he was more familiar with and sent private messages to them. For example, Candace. Bai Xiaowen's reply was that he had obtained a batch of special resources from the Dark Age dimension. Candace's main concern was whether Bai Xiaowen had figured out the secret of Mengchuan's control over the demon army. Bai Xiaowen's reply, small gains. Candace, congratulations, but be careful. The wind has been blowing in the wrong direction recently. What puzzled Bai Xiaowen was that the Hornet Queen didn't send him a private message. It seemed like she wasn't online. The private messages didn't affect Bai Xiaowen's view of the chat area either. Before long, Mengchuan appeared. Golden Stone Overlord Shiryu also appeared. After another round of bickering, Mengchuan angrily accused Bai Xiaowen of deliberately destroying Sky Mansion Overlord's plans in the Dark Age dimension. Shiryu, on the other hand, was dissatisfied with the fairness of the competition for the spirit energy convergence point. After a heated debate, not only the three lords involved, but also some other lords who were related to them also joined in the debate. Bai Xiaowen only argued a few words. After making his point, he did not intend to continue the war of words. Instead, he issued a warning. LV Wang White Phoenix, since the two of you refuse to come to your senses and insist on blocking our teleportation portal to the dinosaur planet, then we will not rule out using extreme measures to defend the sovereignty of the White Phoenix territory. Mingchuan, Tianfu, do you think I'm afraid of you? Sure you, Jean sure, little brother Lu Wang, could it be that you were born in the system? Smiley face, what serious protest, condemnation, and ultimatum. You're playing it pretty well. The group burst into laughter, and many lords also jumped out to ridicule him. After all, Meng Chuan and Shi Yu had a much deeper relationship with the Star Alliance than Bai Xiaowen did. Bai Xiaowen smiled and exited the chat. Let's try peaceful means before resorting to force. You may begin now. Dinosaur Planet. In a nameless valley, there was an azure teleportation gate that was shining brightly. There were tents all around the valley. A group of evolvers was living in the tents. It's time to change the guard, it's time to change the guard. A thin and small evolver waved his arms and shouted, "Where's the leader of the fourth group? It's your turn to keep watch." 5 evolvers came out of the nearby tents one after another. 4 men and 1 woman. One of the muscular men's arms was wrapped around the only female evolver's waist. It looked like the muscular man was the leader of the group. Got it, Black Bug, the muscular man said lazily. You third group only stared at the time of the change of guard. You really don't want to stay for even a second longer. The thin and small evolver Black Bug was the leader of the third group. He led his 4 teammates and said with a smile, "There are treasures everywhere on the dinosaur planet. Of course we have to take advantage of the time of the change of guard to plunder them. Copper Pillar, didn't your fourth group also make a lot of money? Let's not talk about each other." The muscular evolver Copper Pillar shook his head. If it were up to me, it would be enough to leave 1 or 2 people to keep watch. How many evolvers are there in the White Phoenix territory? They're all mid to low level. Their lord isn't here either. Would the others dare to come? The female evolver in Copper Pillar's arms smiled charmingly. That's right. I think the people of the White Phoenix territory are scared out of their wits. They won't come to court death. No matter what, the orders from above are to strictly guard it to the death. Black Bug said seriously. Boring. The muscular Copper Pillar commanded the other 3 male teammates. You guys take turns to keep watch. I'll rest for a while. His arm tightened and he pulled the female evolver into his embrace. He rubbed the curve of her waist and butt. Honey. Let's continue with the third round. The female evolver pounded Copper Pillar coquettishly. Then, she twisted her hips and followed Copper Pillar into the tent. Black Bug swallowed his saliva and waved his hand. Brothers, don't watch anymore. Let's go. Suddenly, Black Bug's figure paused. He took out a magic scroll from his storage ring. After unfolding it, the magic scroll shone with a dense light. A half-body figure appeared. Oh, it's Mr. Fu. Black Bug smiled fawningly. The man in the image above the scroll had a lean face and an immoral aura. It was the former Tang Territory's Grand Preceptor, Fu Jing. Black Bug, has there been any abnormalities with the teleportation gate? No, Mr. Fu, Black Bug said. We've watched it for so many days, but not a single person from the White Phoenix territory dared to come out. Men, we still need to increase our vigilance. Fu Jing said seriously. Let me tell you something. The Lord of the White Phoenix territory, Lu Wang, has returned. He quarreled with Lord Mingchuan and Lord Shi Yu in the group chat. He even threatened to use extreme methods to solve the problem. Black Bug was slightly surprised. Mr. Fu, he really dares? Our territories are allied. Does the White Phoenix territory have any allies? Fu Jing said, I can't see through this person. Logically speaking, he shouldn't dare to take the risk of offending both territories. However, we still need to be prepared for anything. Lord Mengchuan will send people over in the near future. Keep an eye on him. If Lu Wang really does appear, no matter the cost, we must keep him here. Dead or alive. Yes. Black Bug put away the magic scroll. Boss, are we still going? The team members asked one after another. Why are you panicking? Let's go. Black Bug chuckled. Fu Jing is just trying to scare us. I don't believe that Lu Wang would dare to walk into a trap. Even if Lu Wang wants to come, it will take some time for him to pass through the spatial passage. We can still make it in 1 or 2 hours. Boss is right. We can't neglect our private work. Lord Mengchuan won't give us any extra compensation, one of the team members said. The group of 5 flew away and quickly disappeared into the distant sky. They had already explored the area near the teleportation gate. There was nothing valuable left. However, not long after the 5 of them left, the blue light of the teleportation gate suddenly grew brighter. Chapter 1769. Chapter 1763, edited. Old Ye forgot that he had a duel with Mengchuan earlier. Part of Xiao Bai's strength should be obvious. Therefore, Heavenly Province should have a more complete set of countermeasures. Sorry. Something's happening. There were 2 teams of evolvers guarding the teleportation portal, the 4th and 5th teams. The 4th team was currently in charge of guarding the portal, but their leader, Tong Zhu, was still fooling around with another female evolver in the tent. The other 3 team members were patrolling the portal. Seeing that the portal was moving, it was obvious that someone was about to come through. The 3 team members were shocked and immediately shouted. The tent opened, and Tong Zhu hurriedly pulled up his pants while shouting, "Quick, 5th team, come out and get ready for battle. Molly, send out the alarm and tell the other 3 teams to hurry back." Soon, the 2 teams of evolvers, a total of 10 people, surrounded the teleportation portal. There was something to be said here. On the other side of the White Phoenix territory, as long as someone wanted to use the planar teleportation gate to come here, then the moment they stepped into the teleportation gate on the other side, the teleportation gate on the other side would react strangely. However, it would take a certain amount of time to pass through the portal. The further the distance, the longer it would take to pass through the portal. Based on the actual distance between the White Phoenix territory and the dinosaur planet, it would take about half an hour to pass through the portal. Therefore, in this half an hour, the people of Group 4 and Group 5 could quickly get ready for battle and call for the people of the other 3 groups to come to support them. The 3rd team that had just set out was the fastest to return. Black Bug's face was full of bad luck. Damn it, why did they have to come at this time? Stop complaining. Lord Shiryu hasn't arrived yet, and Lord Mengchuan's reinforcements haven't arrived either. We need to think of something, Tong Zhu said with a hint of guilt. That guy Lu Wang isn't simple. He has 3 mid-tier Lord-level summon creatures and even defeated Lord Mengchuan in a direct duel. He's a commander, after all. His strongest asset is his army. Without his army, he's a toothless tiger, Black Bug muttered. The 3 mid-tier Lord-level summon creatures are a bit more troublesome, but they're only level 15. It's not like our teams can't hold them back. The leader of the 5th group was called Wei Xian. He wore a mage robe and held a staff in his hand. He said cautiously, Black Bug is right. As long as we don't let Bai Xiaowen summon the territory's army, we can afford to stall for time. Every team was led by a high-ranking hero. There were 3 high-level heroes present, and the rest were high-level elites. Coupled with the team's tacit understanding, holding back a level 15 Lord summon creature should not be a problem for them. After all, it was a summon creature. There was definitely a gap between it and a real Lord. This was what Black Bug, Bronze Pillar, and the others thought. It was also a logical thought. Most importantly, there was a limit to the number of people that could be teleported. The maximum number of people that could be teleported was 5. Furthermore, if the next batch of people wanted to teleport, they would have to wait until the first batch of people reached their destination. In other words, Bai Xiaowen could only bring 4 people with him in the first batch of teleportation. After Bai Xiaowen arrived, the next batch of teleporters would only arrive half an hour later. The 3 groups were ready. Each of them held their weapons as if they were facing a great enemy. Finally, the light of the teleportation door was magnified to the maximum. After the blinding blue light, 2 figures appeared. Only 2? The 15 evolvers in the 3 groups looked at each other. The person in front of them wore a white robe and had his hands clasped behind his back. He gave off a dignified feeling, as if he were a mountain or a river that was about to merge with the world. It was none other than Bai Xiaowen. The 15 of them could not sense the strength of Bai Xiaowen's aura at all. It was as if he was an ordinary person. This was the most terrifying thing. The man beside him was bare-chested, revealing his firm chest muscles. His eyes were slightly red, and his ears were slightly sharp. When he smiled, one could see the cold light of his canine teeth. Black Bug, Bronze Pillar, and the others recognized Bai Xiaowen, but they did not recognize the man with the canine teeth beside him. However, they could feel the powerful aura exuding from the man with the canine teeth. Without a doubt, this was a Lord-level powerhouse. The leader of the 5th group, Wei Xian, wore a monocle and stared at Bai Xiaowen and the man with the canine teeth. He said in disbelief, Level 16. Lu Wang has actually reached level 16, and the one beside him is his summon creature. A 4th Lord-level summon creature? Black Bug was dumbfounded. This news was even more shocking than Bai Xiaowen's rocket speed of reaching level 16. He could not help but wonder if Bai Xiaowen had the ability to mass-produce Lord-level summon creatures. Don't just stand there. Do it! Bronze Pillar shouted angrily. Wei Xian reacted immediately. He slammed his staff into the ground. Lines of magic runes lit up. Boom, boom, boom. 3 layers of magic arrays linked together and surrounded by Xiaowen and Kits. These 3 layers of magic arrays were cleverly designed. The smallest layer only held onto the teleportation door, isolating Bai Xiaowen and Kits from the door. This eliminated any possibility of Bai Xiaowen escaping through the teleportation door if he saw that the situation was unfavorable. The 2nd layer of magic arrays trapped Bai Xiaowen and Kits. The 3 groups were in the 3rd layer of magic arrays, ready for battle. Bai Xiaowen glanced at the magic arrays. So they've been preparing for a long time. No wonder 3 heroes dare to block my path. Lu Wang, you're about to die. Bronze Pillar shouted loudly. Reinforcements will be here soon. Lord Shiryu and the troops from Tianfu territory will be enough to make you suffer. Wei Xian said sinisterly, these 3 layers of magic arrays will cause spatial fluctuations to become chaotic. Lu Wang, don't even think about using spiritualists to summon the territory's army. Bai Xiaowen smiled. It's just an insignificant trick. It's hard for it to reach the top. In just a few sentences, Bai Xiaowen had already seen through the key nodes of the magic array's operation. On one hand, Bai Xiaowen had a branch of immortal arts, talisman making. He had a grasp of the basic theory of immortal arrays. For low-level magic arrays, of course, he had a high vantage point and could get twice the result with half the effort. On the other hand, Bai Xiaowen had the Eye of Evolution. Under his scan, the energy flow paths of the magic arrays had nowhere to hide. There were no secrets to speak of. After seeing through it, it was time to crack it. Bai Xiaowen extended a finger, drew a symbol in the air, and then flicked it. The flashing symbol carried Bai Xiaowen's true inner force. Like lightning, it shot into a corner of the 2nd layer of magic arrays. Boom! There was a series of explosions. Like toppling dominoes, the symbols of the 2nd layer of magic arrays collapsed one by one. In an instant, the 2nd layer of magic arrays was completely broken by Bai Xiaowen. There was no longer any barrier between Bai Xiaowen, Kits, and the 3 groups. Wei Xian's expression changed. He hadn't expected that the magic arrays he had prepared for several days and used many gold and even dark gold materials to create would be so fragile. Chapter 1770. Go, Kits. After Bai Xiaowen had broken through the 2nd layer, he seemed to have lost interest in the 1st and 3rd layers. He took out the silver throne from his storage ring and sat down in front of the 15 people. he didn't seem to have any intention of fighting. Kits had already endured the infusion of death's power in the Dark Age plane and had become a level 16 vampire lord. Now that his strength had increased, he needed large amounts of battle practice. The 15 evolvers in the three groups were more or less angry. "You, LV Wang, are a lord, but you can't look down on us, a group of high-level evolvers. High-level and mid-level evolvers are completely different." Black Bug let out a long whistle, and his body quickly stretched. A thick shadow peeled off from his body. This shadow's appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but it was very solid. It was like Black Bug's African brother. This was Black Bug's proudest skill, Shadow Master. It replicated Black Bug's attributes in battle specialization 100%. It had no weaknesses or vital points, unlimited stamina, and could absorb the surrounding psionic particles to slowly heal itself and recover health. The only flaw was that it couldn't use skills. Shadow Bug quickly pounced on Bai Xiaowen. A member of the third group waved his short wooden staff, and green, red, and white light enveloped Shadow Bug's body at almost the same time. Nimble Wind, Dragon Strength, and Diamond Skin. Under the effects of these three major skills, Shadow Bug's strength increased dramatically. The other three members of the third group quickly ran, each finding cover. They either attacked from a distance or chanted powerful spells. As for the other two groups, they also displayed their own unique abilities. Their various abilities complemented each other perfectly as they surrounded and attacked Bai Xiaowen, completely ignoring Kits. It seemed that their plan was to not let Bai Xiaowen have the time to cast psychic projection and summon the territory's army. Black Bug had released Shadow Master to protect himself. He didn't dare to charge over personally, so he used Shadow Master to scout the way. Clang! Kit's sharp claws clashed with Shadow Master's blade, leaving behind sparks. Kit's movements were as fast as a ghost, but Shadow Master had the support of Nimble Wind and wasn't at a disadvantage. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly and thought to himself, with the cooperation of high-level evolvers, we can really challenge those above our level. The Shadow Master of the third group, with all kinds of bonuses, was already not inferior to a mid-ranked lord like Keats in terms of strength and speed. After all, this was the main skill of a high-ranked evolver. With the support of his other teammates, delaying an intermediate lord wasn't a problem at all. What puzzled Bai Xiaowen was that it was not easy to form teams in the evolutionary plane. Where did the tacit cooperation of these teams come from? Most likely, they were not a spirit realm exploration team, but had been specially trained in the territory. The three groups even had the spare energy to harass Bai Xiaowen while restraining Kit's attacks. Kits let out a series of strange cries. He and the Shadow Master were clashing head-on, and relying on his superior power, he was able to repeatedly land a successful blow. However, he realized that something was amiss. The Shadow Master's battle specialization was far above Keats. Although he couldn't defeat Keats by relying on his specialization, he could greatly reduce the power of Keats' attacks. After the power of Keats' attacks had been reduced, they could only leave a foot-long wound on the Shadow Master's body. This kind of wound could already be considered a serious injury to a body of flesh and blood, but the Shadow Master didn't seem to feel it at all. Not only did the wound not bleed, but it also rapidly healed. Kits wanted to give up on the Shadow Master and turn to attack the others, but he was impeded by several control-type evolvers who took turns to use techniques to slow him down. It was difficult for him to break through the Shadow Master's blockade. A control-type evolver who had reached a high level was indeed extraordinary. With the model of an elite, he could actually affect the movements of a lord. The tip of Bai Xiaowen's foot tapped rhythmically on the ground. The leader of the fourth group, Tong Zhu, raised a javelin in his hand and shot it over with a whistling sound. His goal was to harass. Bai Xiaowen raised his head and glanced at the javelin. The javelin's speed suddenly slowed, as if it had pierced through a pile of cotton. Finally, it slowed down and hovered 3 feet away from Bai Xiaowen. The javelin was imbued with Tong Zhu's spiritual energy. The javelin in his hands moved at will, just like a sword. It was impossible to guard against. But now, the javelin was blocked by Bai Xiaowen's incomparably vigorous spiritual energy wall, unable to advance even an inch. The female evolver beside Tong Zhu hurriedly placed her palms on Tong Zhu's back. The next second, Tong Zhu's entire body turned red. With a loud shout, he pushed with both palms. Boom! The javelin exploded under the pushing and blocking force. My Thunder God's spear. Tong Zhu was dumbstruck. Bai Xiaowen didn't even glance at Tong Zhu. What Thunder God's spear? The name was domineering, but it was only a piece of gold equipment. Sitting on the silver throne, Bai Xiaowen's spiritual energy amplification was as high as 10 levels. He was practically invincible. Even if Tong Zhu and his teammates worked together, they still wouldn't be able to break through Bai Xiaowen's protective true inner energy. A high-level evolver. He's still a bit strong. Bai Xiaowen gave his evaluation. Then, with a flick of his finger, a ray of black light accompanied by a ray of red light entered Kit's body. 1000 soul essence, plus an instant cast berserk talisman. Kit's body instantly swelled up, and his strength increased by more than 40%. He cackled strangely and abruptly grabbed the Shadow Master's arms in front of him. Exerting strength, he tore the Shadow Master into 2 pieces, which exploded into black mist. Black Bug's body trembled, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The control-type evolvers could no longer restrain Kit's, and he closed in on them like the wind. With a wave of his ghostly claws, 2 heads flew into the air. Tong Zhu, Wei Xian, come help. Black Bug forced himself to focus and called for his 2 heroic teammates. Of the 3 heroes, Black Bug fought in close combat, Tong Zhu attacked from a distance, and Wei Xian cast spells to provide support. At the same time, the remaining team members formed a circular formation under his command. Only then did they manage to prevent the number of casualties from increasing. This battle was unexpectedly difficult. Black Bug and the other 2 high-level heroes had never imagined that LV Wang would be able to suppress them without even making a move himself. He had only used a Lord-level summon creature. A cloud of suspicion gradually rose in everyone's hearts. LV Wang not making a move could be explained by the fact that control-type evolvers weren't good at direct combat. But why didn't he summon the other Lord-level summon creatures under his command? Moreover, with Kit's sudden outburst, no one had the time to harass LV Wang. Why didn't he release the psychic medium and summon the territory's army? But the grim situation made it impossible for these people to think. Soon, a whistle came from the horizon, and figures flew over in formation like flying geese. The reinforcements sent by Lord Mengchuan have arrived. Black Bug's spirits rose. Not only that. The leaders are Lord Shiyu and Lord Jiangjiru. Tong Zhu's face was full of excitement. They're finally here. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes as he looked at the black figures in the distance, a trace of a smile on his face. Chapter 1771. We're finally here. Seeing that the light of the magic formation was still flickering and that Lu Wang had not escaped, Shiyu, who led the crowd, finally breathed a sigh of relief. After receiving the alarm, he led the army here at the fastest speed in order to capture Lu Wang. The reason was, of course, the benefits represented by Lu Wang. The White Phoenix territory that had been annexed once, the transmission channel of the dinosaur planet, and the huge benefits that might exist in the Shao Plane and the Dark Age Plane, as long as Lu Wang was captured. With the means of the Heavenly Mansion territory and the Golden Stone territory, there was no need to worry about not being able to dig out these things. Taking a step back, even if Lu Wang was killed, the rapidly rising White Phoenix territory could be beaten into dust. This new star of the Star Alliance would definitely become a comet. Even if Lu Wang passed on the authority of the Lord to others before he died, his successor would definitely find it difficult to protect the White Phoenix territory. Wei Xian, close the outer magic formation so that we can participate in the battle, Shiyu said loudly. Wei Xian breathed a sigh of relief and also raised an objection. Sir Shiyu, be careful that Lu Wang has a random teleportation item. Among the random teleportation items, the most representative was the escape talisman. Although it couldn't directly cross worlds like the return scroll of the Awaken's plane, it was still a very good life-saving talisman that was very popular among the Star Alliance evolvers. Wei Xian's words were reasonable. With Bai Xiaowen's wealth, he must have a top-notch escape talisman. Don't be nervous. Shiryu spread out his right hand, and an oval-shaped sphere floated in the air. This spatial interference device can interfere with the spatial fluctuations within 50 kilometers. Within this range, any random teleportation items will not be able to be used. Wei Xian nodded and hurriedly removed the outer magic formation. Now, Shiryu and Bai Xiaowen could finally face each other without the barrier of the magic formation. Brother Lu, how have you been? Shiryu smiled brightly. Last time, we parted in this valley. I missed it very much. Bai Xiaowen raised his head and looked at Shiryu in the sky. Shiryu was much stronger than the last time they met, and there was a faint aura of a high-level evolver. Behind him, there were 100 people wearing yellow armor. They were Shiryu's direct subordinates and were equivalent to mid-level evolvers. As for the other 100 or so evolvers with ferocious auras, they were led by a rather familiar old man. They seemed to be reinforcements sent by the Heavenly Mansion. Bai Xiaowen quickly remembered who this old man was. His name was Fu Jing, the former state teacher of Li Weichen. However, Bai Xiaowen ignored the evolved beings of this level. He had no interest in talking to them. Although Shiryu was a Lord-class evolver, he could still arouse Bai Xiaowen's interest in chatting. You've reached level 17? Bai Xiaowen did not rise from his throne. The silver throne floated up, rising to the same height as Shiryu. As for Kits, he had stopped fighting long ago, returning to Bai Xiaowen's side to wait. Shiryu smiled reservedly. I've been stuck at level 16 for more than a year, and I've finally made a breakthrough recently. I've embarrassed myself in front of Brother Lu. In his heart, however, he muttered that Lu Wang was too calm. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. It's a pity. If you were level 17 when we fought over this spiritual energy convergence point, I might not have been able to beat you. Bai Xiaowen's tone was normal, as if he were feeling sorry for Shiryu. However, Shiryu felt very uncomfortable when he heard this. Bai Xiaowen's words faintly sounded like he was looking down on him. However, Shiryu did not show his anger on his face. He only secretly hardened his heart. He said calmly, back then, you and Xiao Xing were singing the same tune, secretly communicating with each other. Even if I had reached level 17, it would have been useless. However, the mountains and rivers will meet again. It's not too late to take back what is rightfully mine. Lu Wang, you should just surrender. I guarantee that you won't die. Bai Xiaowen's eyes were cold. The so-called guarantee that you won't die sounded nice, but it was only because Bai Xiaowen's value would be more easily excavated alive than dead. For Bai Xiaowen, it was a fate worse than death. Bai Xiaowen did not think that Mengchuan, Shiryu, and the others would let him go once his value was completely excavated. He would add another powerful enemy to their ranks for no reason. Shiryu. Bai Xiaowen called him by his name. Today, you and Mengchuan's subordinates came here together. You and I will fight to the death. If I am killed by you, I have nothing to say. But if you are killed by me, don't regret it. Shiryu felt more and more uneasy, but he firmly believed in his rational judgment. Lu Wang did not have the chance to summon his army. He is alone. Even if he summons his mid-tier Lord-level creatures, they are definitely no match for us. I cannot be scared off by his words. Otherwise, how can I establish myself in the Starlink Alliance in the future? Fu Jing glanced at Shiryu from the side. This old faker actually had a similar uneasy feeling in his heart. When he thought about how his recent divination of White Phoenix Lord Lu Wang had not been able to reveal anything, and the future was unclear, Fu Jing felt even more uneasy. However, Mengchuan had specially arranged for him to lead the team, so Fu Jing could not refuse. Mengchuan was not as easy to fool as Li Weichen. Shiryu dispelled his uneasy feelings and said loudly, Lu Wang, since you are so stubborn, then don't blame me for being merciless. The corner of Bai Xiaowen's mouth twitched slightly as he shook his head. Suddenly, numerous greenish-black vortexes appeared in the sky. At the same time, Bai Xiaowen projected a spirit medium image to the ground. He is summoning his lord-level creatures and his territory's army from another world. Take this opportunity to attack. Shiryu shouted loudly as his body suddenly charged forward. The 100 yellow-armored soldiers behind him poured their Earth attribute battle energy into Shiryu's body. The surface of Shiryu's body was instantly covered in a thick layer of yellow light, making him look like a yellow giant. The other evolvers also flew forward and besieged Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen chuckled. Suddenly, a black ripple spread out at high speed. Wherever the ripple went, an enormous pressure would appear. It was a deterrence activated by the power of the Grim Reaper. The deterrence this time was of extremely high priority. It already had the effect of the rank suppression aura of a god descendant. Even Shiryu was rooted to the spot. Of course, Bai Xiaowen needed to be completely focused when using the power of the Grim Reaper. It was like a child waving a sword. If he was not careful, he could easily hurt himself. If he was more familiar with the power of the Grim Reaper, he could even take this opportunity to attack and kill all the enemies in front of him like they were stationary targets. Right now, he could only use the power of the Grim Reaper, deterrence as a stalling skill. A few seconds later, Bai Xiaowen's summoned creatures flew out of the greenish-black vortexes. Bone Race Heavenly King Abaddon and Corpse Race Heavenly King Paji led the way. Behind them were the newly promoted Frost Dragon Lord, Skeletal Giant Lord, and a Devil Lord who had been resurrected through darkness. Including Kits, a total of 6 Lord-level summoned creatures appeared. Chapter 1772. 6 Lord-tier monsters. What's going on? Twice as many as the last time he fought Lord Mengchuan. Fu Jing's eyes widened. He had a bad feeling about this. Last time, Bai Xiaowen had only sent out 3 Lord-tier summoned creatures, and that had already caused a huge commotion in the Star Alliance. Many people had listed Bai Xiaowen as a top expert in Lord-tier duels, even though he had only been a mid-tier evolver who hadn't even reached level 16 at the time. How long had it been since then? The number of Lord-tier summoned creatures by Bai Xiaowen's side had actually doubled. The appearance of 3 Lord-tier summoned creatures could be explained away as a long-term accumulation of potential, but the addition of 3 more in such a short time could only lead people to speculate that Bai Xiaowen had the ability to mass-produce Lord-tier summoned creatures. The implications of these 2 theories were completely different. If these people knew that Bai Xiaowen, Sigdelifa, Wrathclaw, Vladimir, and the other Lord-tier summoned creatures hadn't come out to battle, their imaginations would probably run out. After summoning the 6 Lord-tier monsters, Bai Xiaowen ended his deterrence skill. Abaddon's skeletal warhorse left a trail of hoof prints in the air. He didn't seem to be afraid of the disparity in numbers at all. He continued to lead the charge and charged into the enemy formation. Stop! Shiryu had no choice but to stop Abaddon when he saw him charging towards his yellow-armored warriors. He roared and swung his staff, which collided fiercely with Abaddon's lance. Abaddon's body trembled slightly, and he took a few steps back. Shiryu's face didn't look relaxed at all. Instead, he was overwhelmed with shock. He was 1 level higher than Abaddon, and he was stuck at the bottleneck between mid-tier and high-tier Lord-tier. Logically speaking, even if the 2 of them fought fairly, Abaddon would still lose. Moreover, Abaddon was just a summoned creature. It was common knowledge that summoned creatures were generally weaker than awakened/evolvers of the same level. However, the reality was that he clearly had the support of 100 yellow-armored warriors, and yet he had only managed to push Abaddon back a few steps and gain the upper hand. How could this be? Before Shiryu could figure out the whole story, there was a black shadow above his head. A fat and sturdy black shadow descended from the sky like a mountain, with the momentum of Mount Tai. Shiryu's combat mastery was extremely high. When he saw another lord charging at him, he didn't think too much. He borrowed the recoil from the clash with Abaddon and shot back about 3 meters, dodging the butcher's huge butt. Just this skill of adapting to the situation was something that Abaddon and Butcher couldn't compare to. In terms of raw power, Abaddon and Butcher, who had already become lords and had received the power of the Grim Reaper from Bai Xiaowen, were already the strongest among the rare lords. That was why they were able to fight against the level 17 fighter Lord Shiryu, who was level 16. However, in terms of combat mastery, the two heavenly kings were still far inferior. This was not something that could be made up for in a short period of time. If it was a fair fight, Shiryu could easily defeat Abaddon after familiarizing himself with his 3 axes. That was why Bai Xiaowen chose to gang up on him. Abaddon broke through from the front, while Butcher activated Decay to assist from the side. The two of them worked together to forcibly suppress Shiryu. The Dark Resurrected Demon Lord and the Skeletal Giant Lord charged at the reinforcements from Heaven's Mansion led by Fu Jing. The reinforcements from Heaven's Mansion spread out into formation. A few evolvers who were familiar with each other immediately formed a combat team. Like this, there were dozens of teams in total, surrounding the two lords and starting the battle. During the fierce battle, the Frost Dragon Lord's huge skeletal wings unfurled. With a speed that didn't match its huge body, it charged into the group of yellow-armored warriors. A dark blue frost quickly spread out, enveloping the 100 yellow-armored warriors under Shiryu's command in a frost domain. In an instant, the yellow giant that enveloped Shiryu's body collapsed. He wasn't a commander-type lord to begin with. He had only learned a commander-type skill and used the combat aura of his troops to buff them. Without Bai Xiaowen's solid wall formation, the defense of his troops was average. Moreover, Shiryu was suppressed by Abaddon and Butcher, so he couldn't stop the Frost Dragon's slaughter in time. In the dark blue frost domain, the yellow-armored warriors' faces and armor were covered in frost. They had no choice but to withdraw their combat aura to protect themselves. In this way, Shiryu could no longer receive the combat aura buff from his troops. He could only rely on his own strength to fight and instantly fell into a disadvantageous position. This was the first battle of the 6 lords in Star Alliance, and also the tip of the iceberg of Bai Xiaowen's strength. Whether it was the evolvers from Heaven's Mansion or Goldstone's territory, they all felt a chill run down their spines. The difference between 3 Lord-level summons and 6 Lord-level summons was too great. Moreover, these 6 Lord-level summons all have ferocious strength. They didn't lose to Lord-level evolvers of the same level. Moreover, 2 of them had reached the level of a rare Lord and could fight against a high-level Lord. It was obvious that they hadn't prepared enough to deal with Lu Wang, causing the battle to be at a disadvantage and falling into a passive state. Capture the ringleader first. Fu Jing shouted the codenames and names of the high-level evolvers. Black Bug, Bronze Pillar, Crane Wings, Flying Scythe. Don't hesitate. Hurry up and attack Lu Wang. Once he summons the White Phoenix Army, we'll be finished. Fu Jing was also very crafty. He only shouted verbally and didn't personally go forward. Black Bug secretly spat and assumed a charging posture. However, his feet slid backward as if he were spacewalking. The distance between him and Bai Xiaowen didn't decrease. Instead, it increased. Bronze Pillar was an honest person. Moreover, as a long-range attacker, he couldn't slack off like Black Bug. He took out his backup throwing spears and activated some kind of acceleration mode. He threw them one after another at Bai Xiaowen, hoping to interrupt Bai Xiaowen's psychic projection. The other high-level evolvers didn't know how difficult Bai Xiaowen's main body was to deal with. Holding the inherent idea that a summoner's main body was their weakness, they waved their weapons and rushed forward. These evolvers had different spiritual energy attributes. Therefore, from afar, one could see different colors of spiritual energy shooting toward Bai Xiaowen from different directions. Bai Xiaowen sat on the silver throne and silently released his true inner force to form a spiritual energy barrier. At the same time, it also protected the psychic projection under his feet. Boom boom boom, beams of spiritual energy blasted over, but they couldn't break through Bai Xiaowen's true inner force barrier. They only left ripples on the surface. All the attacks seemed to have hit a pile of cotton. Attack with all your might. Fu Jing shouted from afar. The few high-level evolved heroes exerted all their strength and poured their spiritual energy into their weapons. Crunch, crunch. Swords, spears, and spears broke. The few of them were dumbfounded. Was he still human? We knew that a lord was powerful, but he was only a mid-level lord. He should at least give us high-level evolvers some face, right? How can you just sit there and explode all our weapons? What are you all standing there for? Change to your backup weapons and continue attacking. I don't believe that his spiritual energy is endless. Fu Jing hid behind a group of evolvers and ordered loudly. Noisy. Bai Xiaowen stretched out a finger and pointed it at Fu Jing from afar. Chapter 1773. Crackle. Blinding lightning blossomed from Bai Xiaowen's fingertips. Primordial lightning. Bai Xiaowen's primordial lightning Dao technique was already quite proficient. Coupled with the existence of spiritual power mastery, he didn't need to make a complete casting motion. He could release lightning from his fingers just by thinking about it in his mind. Fu Jing's heart turned cold. He had a feeling that he had encountered a calamity. As long as he was hit by this lightning, there was no chance of survival. Protect me! Fu Jing shouted. The two evolvers beside him immediately rushed over, one from the left and one from the right. They opened their spiritual power defenses and blocked Fu Jing's head. It wasn't that these two evolvers were loyal, but that Fu Jing had secretly bound them with straw puppets. The evolvers bound to the straw puppets usually didn't feel any difference. Only when Fu Jing formed a seal would they be taken away by Fu Jing and become his puppets. These two were both evolvers from the Heavenly Province. Although their status wasn't as high as Fu Jing's, they were older in terms of seniority. If he had a choice, Fu Jing would never be willing to expose the fact that these two were under his control. But now, in order to survive, he couldn't care less. Boom! With a thunderous roar, thin lightning instantly pierced through the two's spiritual power defenses and directly killed the two loyal protectors. Two withered straw puppets slowly fell from their bodies. At this time, Fu Jing had already escaped a few meters away. The lightning slightly changed its angle and brushed past Fu Jing's back with a whoosh. The dripping blood was directly evaporated into a bloody mist by the electric force. Fu Jing screamed and fell down. Fu Jing's Taoist robe was torn into pieces and scattered with the wind. As for Fu Jing's back, there was a huge gaping wound. The exposed vertebrae had been charred by the lightning strike. The remaining lightning force was still desperately drilling into Fu Jing's organs. This was the true fatal injury. With a thud, Fu Jing fell to the ground and vomited blood. He was already seriously injured and on the verge of death. He looked at the sky with some reluctance. Bai Xiaowen, who was sitting on the silver throne, flashed before his eyes like a revolving lantern. All kinds of scenes of his life appeared. Am I going to die? Sure enough, I was drawn into a whirlpool that I shouldn't have been drawn into. Fu Jing closed his eyes and waited for death, but Bai Xiaowen didn't even look at him. The reason was simple. If Bai Xiaowen wanted to kill Fu Jing, it would only take a flick of his finger. However, would you deliberately step on a heavily injured and dying ant a second time? It was not like Bai Xiaowen had nothing to do. Anyway, it was enough that Fu Jing couldn't run away. Your skill, primordial lightning mastery, has improved. It is currently at the advanced level. A notification came from the spirit realm. Bai Xiaowen was a little surprised. Fu Jing was really a lucky general. He had used primordial lightning so many times in the Dark Age plane and had not advanced. Fu Jing had advanced after one strike. After evolving, the primordial lightning gained a new special effect, snake lightning. Bai Xiaowen focused slightly and understood the snake lightning special effect. This was a change in form. When Bai Xiaowen used primordial lightning, it was no longer limited to striking the opponent's head with lightning. It could produce many changes. It could even attack multiple targets at the same time like just now. When practiced to a high level, the snake lightning special effect could make the primordial lightning's lightning power meander like a snake, making it impossible to guard against. Bai Xiaowen instantly recalled the virtuous teacher Zhang Jiao's finger lightning. Compared to Bai Xiaowen's primordial lightning, snake lightning, the power was not on the same level, but the form was similar. The shock brought by Bai Xiaowen's attack was even greater than that of the 6 Lord-level summon creatures. One strike heavily injured a high-level hero-level evolver, causing him to completely lose the ability to move. This strength had completely surpassed the Lord level. It was simply the power of a high-level king-level powerhouse. In fact, Bai Xiaowen could heavily injure a high-level demon lord in one strike in the Dark Age plane. In addition to the greatly increased spiritual power level of his own strength, the Qi cultivation techniques increase in the power of skills, as well as the expert-level spiritual power mastery, were also key. Now that he was sitting on the silver throne, Bai Xiaowen's every spell attack would be multiplied in power. Fu Jing was not killed on the spot, which could be considered as his adaptability. In the face of such a spell attack, the wisest thing to do was to rely on movement, flash, and other means to completely avoid it. However, Fu Jing was only a prophecy-type evolver. Whether it was his reflexes or movement speed, they were not outstanding. As a lightning-type spell, primordial lightning's speed was extremely fast. How could it be easy to avoid it? Bai Xiaowen's primordial lightning had evolved again. In the future, his attacks would only be more covert. Under the throne, the psychic projection gradually solidified. A huge projection of the forest appeared. The evolvers of Tianfu territory and Golden Stone territory all had the intention to retreat. No one knew who was the first to shout, "Turn off the space disruptor, turn off the space disruptor. Lord Shiryu, let us leave." Shiryu's face was gloomy. He fiercely attacked with unparalleled momentum. Abaddon and Butcher responded with all their strength. However, the moment the war staff, lance, and chainsaw collided, the 2 heavenly kings sensed that something was wrong. The force on Shiryu's war staff left as soon as it touched it. There was no follow-up infusion of spiritual power. With the force of the recoil, Shiryu's figure shot backward and instantly bounced back 10 feet. After all, the 2 heavenly kings' combat expertise was far inferior. Although they could suppress Shiryu, if Shiryu wanted to leave, there were too many gaps to escape and would not be entangled. Shiryu took a breath and took out the elliptical sphere known as the space disruptor from his waist. He gripped it hard. On the surface of the space disruptor, flickering magic incantations gradually extinguished. This meant that it was gradually closing. The spatial fluctuations within a radius of 50 kilometers were also gradually returning to normal. Bai Xiaowen shook his head slightly. It's too late. The projection was complete. Summon the territory's army. A large group of demon beasts happily rushed out of the battlefield. The leader was the Wrath Claw. Between the necks of each demon beast, there was a necklace inscribed with talismans. Between each necklace, there was a chain flickering with lightning that connected to each other, cutting the space of the battlefield into pieces. Shiryu's space disruptor had been completely extinguished. However, when he crushed the escape talisman, he discovered that there was no reaction. The space was sealed again. However, this time, it was Bai Xiaowen's demon beast army that sealed the area. Go! Bai Xiaowen waved his hand. Skeletal archers, skeletal demon arcane masters, giant plague beasts, a large group of summoned creatures that had been strengthened by the power of death appeared at the 4 corners of the battlefield. Although their strength had not reached the level of a lord, their overall strength had still increased by a large margin after being infused with the power of death. Bai Xiaowen flicked his finger and shot out a bolt of primordial snake lightning. It zigzagged between the evolvers that looked like leaders. Black Bug, Bronze Pillar, and the others were all infused with lightning energy. The moment their protective spiritual energy was broken, their bodies were instantly paralyzed and then drowned by the summoned creatures. Chapter 1774. Soon, the evolvers under Fu Jing's command were defeated. Most of them surrendered and were obediently imprisoned by Bai Xiaowen's true inner force. A small number of stubborn people were directly killed. The 100 yellow armored warriors under Shiryu's command were also scattered by the Frost Dragon Lord and the Skeletal Giant Lord's attacks. After taking care of his subordinates, Bai Xiaowen personally took action to deal with Shiryu, the main character. Shiryu looked at the group of lords who were eyeing him covetously and smiled bitterly. It could be said that he was caught in a trap of his own making. If he didn't have the spatial interference device, he could at least escape before Bai Xiaowen's demon beast formation appeared. However, the spatial interference device needed time to be deactivated. At that moment, Shiryu could only fly quickly and turn left and right to bypass the demon beast formation's blockade, hoping to escape the demon beast formation's blockade. However, a sword mark appeared in front of him, followed by a flash of light. Bai Xiaowen sat on the silver throne and blocked Shiryu's path. Bai Xiaowen stretched out his hand and grabbed at the air. A giant hand formed by true inner force grabbed at him. This was the Seven Fiends Palm Seal technique of the former protector of the Black Sky Cult, Qiu Zhenli. Now that Bai Xiaowen had the expert level of spiritual power mastery and knew the circulation of the Seven Fiends Palm Seal, he could easily imitate it. Its power was more than 10 times stronger than Qiu Zhenli's. Shiryu felt the air pressure around him suddenly increase, making it difficult for him to breathe. He tried his best to break free, but the giant hand still held his body. It was as if shackles made of steel were firmly binding Shiryu. Butcher's hook and Abaddon's lance pierced Shiryu's shoulder blades, one from the left and one from the right. Both of them used large weapons. Although they were piercing wounds, they almost cut off both of Shiryu's arms. While Shiryu was suffering from unbearable pain, Bai Xiaowen closed in and pressed his palm on Shiryu's chest. "Don't resist if you don't want to die," Bai Xiaowen threatened coldly. Shiryu's body trembled. He felt an extremely cold and powerful energy invade his meridians and completely seal his spiritual power. This powerful energy caused Shiryu's entire body to tremble. This was definitely not the power of a Lord-tier monster. It had even surpassed the power of a King-tier monster. Shiryu tried to mobilize his spiritual energy, but there was no response. He became even more alarmed. This proved one thing: the power that was imprisoning him was far beyond the Lord tier. Bai Xiaowen used the power of the Grim Reaper to imprison Shiryu. It was no exaggeration to say that as long as Bai Xiaowen did not unseal Shiryu, no other evolver would be able to. Unless it was another evolver with divine power. "Who are you?" Shiryu stared at Bai Xiaowen. "Who are you? Don't you already know who I am?" Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. "Don't take me for a fool," said Shiryu coldly. "How could a native from Earth grow to this level in just over a year? You must have a powerful background. You're definitely not an ordinary person." "Ha, you're not simple either," Bai Xiaowen sized Shiryu up. "Tell me, who's the big boss behind you?" Bai Xiaowen had long heard that Goldenstone region basically did not encounter any external threats. This meant that Goldenstone region was definitely under someone's protection. Shiryu hesitated for a moment and actually answered Bai Xiaowen's question. "My real name is Xiaoyu." "Xiaoyu? Xia." Bai Xiaowen's thoughts turned very quickly. "Don't tell me that the person behind you is the lord of the Great Yan region, Xia Yan? That's not a funny joke." There was a trace of anger on Shiryu's face. "I'm not joking. Where's the evidence?" Shiryu took a deep breath and said, "I have a warning jade talisman hidden in my storage ring. Lord Xia Yan also had a piece. When I'm in danger, as long as I crush the jade talisman, Lord Xia Yan's jade talisman will also break. Thank you for your frankness." Bai Xiaowen waved his hand. Kits immediately flew over and searched Shiryu's entire body. He even took off the storage ring at the first opportunity. Shiryu seemed to be mentally prepared for this treatment and did not resist. Of course, now that his spirit energy was imprisoned and his body was bound by the energy of the giant handprint, he did not have any ability to struggle. Shiryu was very cooperative and erased the spiritual imprint on the storage ring. Kits poured out a pile of things, including spirit crystals, materials, props, and so on. From the pile of props, he found the warning jade talisman. Bai Xiaowen scanned it with his eye of evolution and confirmed that it was a warning jade talisman. Of course, even without the eye of evolution, with Bai Xiaowen's knowledge of talismans, he could roughly determine that the function of this jade talisman was indeed related to another jade talisman. Lu Wang, you should believe me now, right? Shiryu's voice was somewhat hoarse. This time, I admit defeat. I hope you let me go for the sake of Lord Xiaoyan. I promise that I will not interfere in the affairs of Sky Manor and White Phoenix Manor in the future. Bai Xiaowen smiled and shook his head. I blocked your door for a month and even broke into your house with a knife to kidnap your ticket. In the end, my car overturned and I was caught by you. At this time, will you let me go? Bai Xiaowen's analogy was very simple. This portal belonged to White Phoenix Manor and naturally had the sovereignty of White Phoenix Manor. Of course, it could be said that it was Bai Xiaowen's home. Shiryu stared at Bai Xiaowen. Lu Wang, don't go too far in life. No matter what your background is, at most, you're from Below's Manor or Boyd Manor, right? You can't be stronger than Great Yan Manor. You should already be clear about the current situation. Xiafeng can't even protect himself. It's absolutely impossible for him to protect your White Phoenix Manor. At this juncture, you'll suffer a great loss if you offend Great Yan Manor. Thank you for your reminder, Bai Xiaowen shook his head and deliberately said with a smile, based on my understanding of Lord Xiafeng, he's not someone who can be killed so easily, Shiryu snorted. Xiafeng is too arrogant. Does he really think that Great Yan Manor, which has a history of nearly 100 years, is something he can casually provoke? He's now a caged beast. Sooner or later, he won't be able to escape death. You're speaking so vaguely. I don't believe you, Bai Xiaowen said with a chuckle, looking very relaxed. However, Shiryu became alert. He stared into Bai Xiaowen's eyes and said, Are you trying to get information from me? It's useless. No one can help Xiafeng. You're no different. Where is Xiafeng trapped? Bai Xiaowen saw that his persuasion was ineffective and his face turned cold. Shiryu said in a low voice, I won't say. Bai Xiaowen frowned and waved his hand to have Butcher carry Shiryu away. After that, Bai Xiaowen tidied up the battlefield and separated the captives according to their strength. Among them, the high-level heroes were all switched to being imprisoned with the power of death. This was the safest way. As for the elite-level evolvers, they couldn't even break free from the imprisonment of true inner force. There was no need to treat them more seriously. Chapter 1775. Bai Xiaowen had issued a warning to Tianfu Territory and Goldstone Territory in the Blue Star Overlord group. However, at that time, not only the two territories, but even the other Star Alliance overlords didn't pay much attention to the warning. It wasn't until Bai Xiaowen's actions caused a huge commotion within the Star Alliance that many overlords reopened the records of the public chat area and examined the weight of Bai Xiaowen's warning. The more they examined it, the heavier it became. This was because Bai Xiaowen's battle results were too shocking. The allied forces of Tianfu Territory and Goldstone Territory totaled 316 people. They blocked the White Phoenix Territory's portal on the dinosaur planet, wanting to show Bai Xiaowen their strength. Among these 316 people, there were more than 40 high-level heroes, including the newly promoted high-level overlord, Goldstone Territory Shiryu, who led 100 troops as reinforcements. However, in the end, 107 people were killed on the spot, and the remaining 209 were taken captive. Even Goldstone Territory Shiryu and the Star Alliance wily old fox, Fu Jing, were among the captives. None of the 316 people were able to escape. It was said that this was the result of Lu Wang alone. A name flashed through the minds of many overlords, Mr. Xiafeng. This Lu Wang was the living embodiment of Mr. Xiafeng. Moreover, the speed of his rise was even faster than Mr. Xiafeng's. A fierce debate broke out in the Blue Star Overlord group. Tianfu Territory's Meng Chuan jumped up and down, colluding with familiar overlords and sternly condemning White Phoenix Territory's conduct of war. It was simply an undeclared war. Tianfu territory's loss of dozens of high-level hero-level evolvers was truly painful. Bai Xiaowen also issued a stern statement in the Overlord group. This battle was White Phoenix territory's self-defense. If it was a conduct of war, then Tianfu territory and Goldstone territory were the ones who started it. One by one, the overlords expressed their opinions. Some supported White Phoenix territory, while others supported Tianfu territory. In comparison, the number of overlords supporting both sides was about the same. This meant that after Bai Xiaowen's rise, he had become a force that could not be ignored in the Star Alliance. Many people had taken the risk of offending the Heavenly Province to express their goodwill to him. Of course, it was also important to note that those who supported the Heavenly Mansion territory were mostly old and powerful lords. Those who supported the White Phoenix territory, other than Candace, were mostly weak lords. The Queen Bee, who hadn't appeared last time, also appeared this time. She chatted with Bai Xiaowen privately. It turned out that when Bai Xiaowen returned from the Dark Age yesterday, the Queen Bee was cultivating and blocked the messages from the Overlord group. It was not surprising that the Queen Bee also supported Bai Xiaowen. It was worth mentioning that Xiao Xing, the Lord of the Shrinking Bone territory, didn't remain silent this time. He publicly expressed his support for the White Phoenix territory and condemned Tianfu territory for starting a war. He also pointed out that Tianfu territory had something to do with Xiafeng's disappearance and demanded that Tianfu territory reveal Xiafeng's whereabouts. Mengchuan was furious. The Shrinking Bone territory was just a vassal territory of the Great Xia territory. Although the Shrinking Bone territory had its own army and Lord Xiao Xing's strength wasn't bad compared to other vassal territories, its political status in the Starlink was still relatively low. Mengchuan was furious that Xiao Xing dared to offend such a territory. He said darkly, "The Shrinking Bone territory has lost its protection now that Xiao Xiafeng is gone. Xiao Xing, you still dare to be so impudent? Do you really think I can't take care of you?" Xiao Xing didn't back down even though he was being threatened. "Everything in the Shrinking Bone territory was bestowed upon us by Lord Xiafeng. I will fight for Lord Xiafeng to the end even if I have to use the strength of the entire territory." "Good. You have guts." These were Mengchuan's last words in the public chat area. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and thought about the position of each lord in this debate, as well as their thoughts. Afterward, he accepted Candace and the Queen Bee's invitation to meet at the Blue Planet's evolutionary platform. "Congratulations. Amazing." Inside a private room in the arena, the two female lords praised Bai Xiaowen non-stop the moment they met. After Bai Xiaowen sat down, he said with a smile, "I also have to thank you for fulfilling your promise and protecting the White Phoenix territory while I was away. Tell us, what did you gain in the Dark Aeroplane?" Candace was very curious. "I gained a lot." Bai Xiaowen spread his palm on the table lightly, and a few items flew out of his storage ring. "Chaos Core. I knew you wouldn't be missing something like this." The Queen Bee picked up a Chaos Core with her slender fingers and examined it carefully. She said, "This is a high-grade Chaos Core that only a demon leader would drop. Such pure evil energy can only be found in the Dark Aeroplane where demons wreak havoc." "Lady Queen Bee, you seem to be very interested in the Chaos Core," Bai Xiaowen said. "Of course. Demons are generally good at teleportation. Their demon cores are naturally an important material for creating high-grade teleportation scrolls. Teleportation scrolls were actually equivalent to the escape talismans in Hua Xia's background. For escape talismans and teleportation scrolls, the higher the grade, the better. The higher the grade, the greater the maximum teleportation distance, and the lower the possibility of being chased by the enemy. Another key point was the priority. The opposite of escape means would always be sealing means. For example, Bai Xiaowen's Demon Beast Sealing Array, Electric Net, Shiryu's Spatial Interference Device, and Bai Xiaowen's Space Trapping Immortal Array, 8-Gate Immortal Array, and so on. They all had the effect of interfering or sealing space. The priority of escape scrolls had to be higher than the priority of sealing means to be effective. Although the effect would be reduced even if it was effective, it was still better than not being able to use it. Hearing this, Bai Xiaowen took out a dark gold chaos core of a lord. I have some understanding. Other than making teleportation scrolls, demon cores can also be used to create equipment or for alchemy. The queen bee's eyes lit up as she took the dark gold chaos core. How many of these do you have? I'll take all of them. She did not answer directly. Instead, it was Candace who took over. That's right. Equipment with demon cores is still very popular in the Starlink. Bai Xiaowen looked at the queen bee and said with a smile, Lady Queen Bee, don't be anxious. This is a long-term business. The queen bee sighed. You have indeed established a foundation in the Dark Age plane. How far are you at now? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said with a smile, I've barely established a foothold. He did not answer directly. Instead, he smiled and pushed the other samples on the table. The two of you might as well take a look at the other items. For example, this demon metal and demon fire ebony are all good materials for creating equipment. Lady Candace, can you take a look and see if there is a market for them in the Starlink? And this demon runestone, Lady Queen Bee should also be interested. Chapter 1776. Candace had already noticed the other materials on the table. She was more interested in this material called evil fire ebony. The elves had an affinity with wooden equipment, and a wooden equipment could unleash 120% of its power in the hands of an elf. However, there were too few wooden materials suitable for making equipment. Candace's collection of magical wood wasn't enough to equip her army. Now that another type of wood suitable for making equipment had appeared, and from Bai Xiaowen's tone, it could be obtained in the long term, how could Candace not pay attention to it? Although there was a certain amount of dark energy left in it, it still needed to be treated with a new process, and it was not as mature as the enchanted spirit wood. However, the evil fire energy was not completely useless. If handled properly, it could even add additional attributes to equipment. As for the other samples of dark energy metals, including dark energy gold, enchanted silver and several other precious metals, Candace wasn't interested in them. However, she knew that these things were in high demand in the Starlink Lord's trading market. Rivendell had always been in the information business. Candace had a wide network of contacts, and on the basis of her well-informed information network, she naturally engaged in the business of reselling and introducing brokers. Bai Xiaowen knew this and asked the right person. I can help you contact a buyer for the dark energy metals. You can contact them directly and negotiate the price. Bai Xiaowen heard this and laughed. I still have to pay the intermediary fee. This was the business of brokers. Forget about it. However, can Lord L.V. Wang give us a discount on the evil fire ebony? Candace's smile had a hint of charm. Rivendell is interested in purchasing it long-term. The queen bee was also slightly tempted. She had a huge demand for chaos cores, especially high-quality ones. It was also a long-term demand. Of course, she hoped that Bai Xiaowen would give her a certain discount on the price. However, the queen bee's personality was a little more aloof. She couldn't bring herself to show her superiority as a female lord to Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen tilted his head. Back then, it was thanks to the queen bee and Lady Candace that I was able to obtain the opportunity to go to the Dark Age. Of course, I will express my gratitude. I can give you a 60% to 20% discount for the materials you need. The queen bee and Candace had secretly made an agreement with Bai Xiaowen to deal with the Heavenly Mansion territory. The two of them had also taken care of the White Phoenix territory during this period of time, mainly speaking up for justice in the Territory Lord group. If it weren't for the two of them, Meng Chuan would have easily caused public opinion to be detrimental to Bai Xiaowen's territory. If that had happened, Bai Xiaowen wouldn't have been able to enjoy such a comfortable life in the Dark Age. Bai Xiaowen accepted the favor because he thought that the queen bee and Candace could be friends. The queen bee and Candace were recognized by Bai Xiaowen. Of course, they weren't greedy people. They were aware of the situation in the Dark Age dimension. Bai Xiaowen had risked his life to conquer it. Even if the two of them had some financial support in the beginning, the proportion was very small. Naturally, they wouldn't ask for favors. Even Candace thought that Bai Xiaowen was being kind by giving them a 20% discount. She didn't expect Bai Xiaowen to give them a 60% to 20% discount. While she was happy, she also found it hard to believe. The queen bee asked, "What are the criteria for a 60% to 20% discount?" Bai Xiaowen explained, "It's based on the amount of supplies you need. However, the greater the quantity you require, the less profit I can give you." It seemed difficult to understand and was contrary to the business logic of Earth. However, the two lords could understand what Bai Xiaowen meant. The materials that Bai Xiaowen could provide were all taken from the Dark Age dimension. They were limited, and most of them were special materials that were relatively rare in the Interstellar Alliance, such as the Chaos Core, evil energy materials, and so on. It could be said that he didn't have to worry about the lack of a market. Naturally, he didn't need to make a small profit but quick turnover. The reason why he gave them a profit was because of the friendship between the two lords and the help that they had provided before. So, if the two of them needed less, Bai Xiaowen would give them a 40% discount, which was equivalent to the cost price, fog. If the monthly demand was high, then he could only give them a 20% discount. After all, the White Phoenix domain was now extremely hungry for spirit crystals, and there were nearly 20,000 demon soldiers still waiting to be domesticated. The so-called domestication actually referred to the process of the natives becoming citizens of the Interstellar Alliance. Bai Xiaowen didn't want to profiteer from the two half-allies who had helped him, so he still wanted to sell the materials that he had plundered from the Dark Age dimension to the Interstellar Alliance Lord's market. The queen bee quickly understood Bai Xiaowen's true meaning inside. "We didn't actually do anything. You were the one who fought for the Foundation. Even if I want to make money, there's no need to squeeze a little brother like you to gamble with his life." Candace, however, understood another layer of meaning from Bai Xiaowen's words. Her eyes lit up. "Lord Lv Wang means that there are a lot of materials produced? Apart from satisfying the needs of our two territories, we can also export them in large quantities?" Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. "I did a rough calculation. The current inventory should be around 5 to 10 million crystals. Because I don't know the specific price, the valuation is more general." Candace and the queen bee both revealed shocked expressions. "Didn't you say that you barely managed to gain a foothold? You didn't conquer the entire dimension, did you?" After a short silence, the two asked at the same time, their excitement overflowing. Bai Xiaowen could only give a rough description of the progress of the Dark Age dimension after being interrogated by the two beautiful lords. Even though he casually described the process, the two beautiful lords' imaginations still ran wild. "Leave the sales channels to me," Candace volunteered. Candace volunteered, "I'll organize it later and give you the information on what resources each territory needs. With your permission, I'll inform these territories to discuss with you in detail." Bai Xiaowen smiled. "Then I'll leave it to Lady Candace. The specific price will be discussed in detail by the territory's management. Also, I want to ask you something." "Go ahead." Lord Xiafeng disappeared. Was he really plotted against, or did he get lost in the exploration of the spirit realm or the universe secret realm? Candace didn't hesitate. "I can tell you responsibly that this matter isn't that simple. He must have been plotted against." "Who?" Candace said, "There aren't many territories with this ability." "Forget it, I won't beat around the bush. According to the internal discussion of the God's Court organization, the biggest suspect is the leader of Dian." This was corroborated with the information that Bai Xiaowen had obtained so far. "Where's Lord Xiafeng now?" Bai Xiaowen said. "I have a question that I hope to ask him in person." Bai Xiaowen wasn't strong enough before, but now he thought that he was qualified to know the truth. End of chapter. Chapter 1777. Candace hesitated for a moment and said, "I'm not sure about that. Actually, Lord Xiafeng's subordinates and subordinates should be the most concerned about this problem. They might have done some in-depth investigation." Bai Xiaowen asked, "Then how did they react?" Candace smiled helplessly and said, what reaction can they have? Compared to Lord Xiafeng's leaps and bounds in power, his subordinates are more average. After all, the Great Xia territory has only been established for a few years. You should have a deep understanding of this point. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly to express his understanding. It was very difficult for evolvers to form a team to explore the spirit world, so individual ability was extremely important. After several adventures in the spirit world, Bai Xiaowen had obtained a large number of high-quality light balls of insight. As a dual-profession evolver, his main profession had risen to level 16, and his second profession had risen to level 14. In addition to the uniqueness of the command-type classics and the strength of the late stage of the Taishu scripture, Bai Xiaowen, as a mid-level evolver, already had the strength standard of the top evolver lords. However, Bai Xiaowen's teammates during the awakening period could not replicate his rocket-like speed. Currently, they were all level 14 or 15 hero professions. This was the result of Bai Xiaowen obtaining the source martial scripture in Xiaowei's plane. Without the source martial scripture, it would be a problem for his teammates to advance to mid-level evolvers. It was undeniable that Xiao Rui, Li Shi, and the others were very outstanding. Their growth speed was already ahead of a large number of evolvers at the same time. However, it was still difficult for them to keep up with Bai Xiaowen's footsteps. On the level of martial strength, whether it was conquering the spirit world or conquering the Star Alliance, Bai Xiaowen had to rely on himself. Xiao Rui and the others could only help Bai Xiaowen deal with some of the territory's affairs under his protection. This kind of territory's power structure was relatively abnormal. When Bai Xiaowen was in charge, the White Phoenix territory was a new noble that could compete with the old territories. However, when Bai Xiaowen was not there, the strength of the White Phoenix territory immediately dropped by more than a level. Xiafeng's situation was similar to Bai Xiaowen's. Xiafeng was also a peerless genius. His speed of improvement was extremely fast, leaving his original subordinates in the dust. As Xiafeng's strength soared, he would naturally compete with high-level opponents. This was unavoidable. With Xiafeng around, Great Xia could still deal with high-level territories, such as Great Yin. However, if something happened to Xiafeng, Great Xia's influence would immediately plummet. Of course, Mr. Xiafeng had been running the Great Xia territory for many years. The overall standard of the Great Xia territory was much higher than that of the White Phoenix territory. The current Great Xia territory should still have the combat strength of a third-grade veteran territory. However, falling from the front of the third grade to the bottom of the third grade was inevitable. In other words, they went from having the ability to challenge Great Yin territory to only being on par with Tianfu territory. The difference was so huge that it was difficult to describe. What Candace meant was that the current Great Xia territory could not be compared to when Xiafeng was around. They did not have enough ability to investigate the mystery of Xiafeng's disappearance. Bai Xiaowen squinted his eyes, his face expressionless. Candace and the Queen Bee both thought that Bai Xiaowen was worried about Xiafeng's safety. After all, in their eyes, Xiafeng had once protected the White Phoenix territory, and there was a relationship between them. The Queen Bee comforted him, "Don't worry too much. Sir Xiafeng is not an ordinary person. His personal strength is at the top of the entire Interstellar Alliance. He will definitely be able to turn misfortune into fortune." Candace followed and said, "Yes, you still have to deal with the wrangling between Tianfu territory and Goldenstone territory. Who knows if a war will break out? Let's get through this first. Sir Xiafeng's matter does not have much to do with you." Bai Xiaowen's expression softened. He smiled and said, "I heard that the Great Yin territory and Tianfu territory have a good relationship. This time, Xiafeng's disappearance and Tianfu territory's attack on me are not isolated incidents." After returning to the territory, Bai Xiaowen handed over the matter of selling goods to Jinmi and Xiao Rui. Candace sorted out the list of potential buyers and handed it over. Jinmi and Xiao Rui contacted the corresponding territory lords according to the list and negotiated the trade of goods. The information Candace gave was not only a list of names, but also the frequency of the appearance of the Chaos Core and other goods in the Interstellar Alliance Trade Center, the price of each transaction, the buyers and sellers, the volume of transactions, and so on. These were all for the White Phoenix territory to refer to. The scale of the negotiations was mainly controlled by Shinmi. As an extremely rare evolver of the Department of Internal Affairs and Management, her intuition for sorting out information in business negotiations was much sharper than the average person's. At this time, Shinmi could no longer see the shadow of the Three Kingdoms plane. In the past year or so, she had also undergone a complete transformation. The first half of her life seemed to have been walking in a dark alley. It was only when Bai Xiaowen took her out of the Three Kingdoms plane that she finally entered the colorful and vast world. As for Qiao Rui, he mainly relied on the authority of the Territory Lord group to act as Shinmi's mouthpiece. Bai Xiaowen constantly traveled between the spirit world and the Dark Age plane. He used the spirit crystals obtained from the sale of resources to domesticate the demon army batch by batch, turning them into the army of the White Phoenix territory. The formation training was also in full swing. However, Bai Xiaowen discovered one thing, and that was that the command of the demon army was much more difficult than that of the other races. Although the demons all used dark energy and were of the same attribute, the dark energy itself was a type of extremely destructive energy, and it had a certain degree of instability. Just by looking at the ugly and twisted faces of the demons, one could tell how tyrannical the dark energy was. Some of the demons could even be blinded by the dark energy. In addition, the demons were wild and unruly, so it was not easy to make them obey orders. Therefore, after several attempts, Bai Xiaowen was unable to make the demons manifest their spirit energy. He could only use the most basic and unskilled combination attacks. However, this piqued Bai Xiaowen's interest. He was a genius of the command system, and he viewed training the demon army as a challenge and experience. If he could tame the demon army and train them to the point where they could manifest their spirit energy in battle, Bai Xiaowen's command system would definitely reach a new level. He might even be able to become a high-level command system evolver. The main reason he trained the demon army was to guard against the Sky Province territory. After all, he had killed and captured many evolvers from the Sky Province territory. It was hard to say what Mengchuan's reaction would be. Moreover, Mengchuan wasn't the only one Bai Xiaowen was guarding against. Time passed day by day. What Bai Xiaowen found strange was that Mengchuan seemed to have calmed down. He didn't seem to have any intention of declaring war on the White Phoenix territory. Bai Xiaowen discussed this with his companions several times, and all of them felt that it was strange. The White Phoenix territory was currently in the process of digesting the spoils of war. They were receiving large amounts of spirit crystals almost every day, and most of these spirit crystals were used to domesticate the demon army and increase their military strength. If the Sky Province territory didn't declare war soon, how much would the White Phoenix territory expand after digesting the spoils of war from the Dark Age? An army with the combat strength of 1,000,000 spirit crystals wasn't something the Sky Province territory could shake. Of course, Bai Xiaowen didn't let down his guard. Not declaring war didn't mean peace. With Mengchuan's character, it was possible that he wouldn't care about his reputation and directly launch a sneak attack. On this day, a large announcement suddenly appeared in the Blue Star Overlord group. Sky Province territory declares war on the Great Xia territory. Sky Province territory declares war on the Xiaogu territory. Cecil Province declares war on the Great Xia territory. Cecil Province declares war on the Xiaogu territory. End of chapter. Chapter 1778. The temporary peace was broken. War was finally inevitable. However, the White Phoenix territory wasn't dragged into the flames of war. What's going on with Mengchuan? He actually declared war on a territory under the Great Xia territory. Could it be that Lord Xiafeng has met with misfortune? Qiao Rui asked. The other parties that had declared war on Tianfu territory, such as Cecil territory, were all vassal territories of Tianfu territory. Vassal territories advancing and retreating together with the Lord's territory was more of a political statement. No one felt that vassal territories had much potential for war. The outcome of the war was still decided by the Lord's territory. At the very least, the vassal territories under Tianfu territory were all weak and empty shells. Of course, Tanggu territory was an exception. Lord Xiafeng's attitude towards vassal territories was unique. He didn't impose any harsh conditions on them. He even allowed Tanggu territory to retain its own army. This was something that many Star Alliance lords couldn't understand. Xiao Xing, the lord of Tanggu territory, was also known as the luckiest lord of the Star Alliance. Not only did he obtain a lot of freedom, but he also had the protection of Lord Xiafeng's prestige. This was why he and Goldenstone territories Shiryu were known as the twin stars of the younger generation of lords. This time, Mengchuan had directly declared war on Tianfu territory because of the grudge from 3 years ago. Mengchuan had given Bai Xiaowen a detailed description of the grudge between the two of them, but Bai Xiaowen didn't even bother to read it. What grudge? It was nothing more than an excuse for war, a fig leaf. Because of this, Mengchuan received a lot of criticism from the lords. Many of them thought that Mengchuan was too warlike and was a dangerous lord. Many lords had closed their mutual trust agreements with Mengchuan and refused to cooperate with Tianfu territory. For a territory, this kind of isolation wasn't fatal, but it was very uncomfortable. It meant that many aspects of the territory's development would stagnate, and it would become an isolated island in the Star Alliance. Without the help of other territories, Tianfu territory would have problems even changing the standard equipment of the territory army. Bai Xiaowen also gradually gained a better understanding of the demand for standard military equipment. In the world of evolvers, equipment was very easy to destroy. It wasn't as if one could get a piece of equipment that could be used once and for all. Evolvers or natives of the same strength could use spirit energy to enhance their attacks and increase their destructive power. The destructive power of a spiritual attack would first affect the material of the equipment, and the durability of the equipment would be the price. Powerful evolvers usually used gold quality equipment. The quality of the equipment was passable and could last for a long time. However, the equipment of the Spirit World Army was usually mainly blue and white equipment, and the quality of the equipment was worrisome. Even if they didn't go to war, the usual training would cause the durability of their equipment to decrease. The standard equipment of the Spirit World Army could not be repaired by the laws of the Spirit World. They could only rely on blacksmiths like Hansu. Although blacksmiths could repair the durability of equipment, it was often at the cost of reducing the upper limit of the equipment's durability. For example, a piece of equipment with 2/50ths durability could become 40/40 after being repaired by a blacksmith. Only a top-notch master with exquisite craftsmanship could perfectly restore the durability of equipment and make it as good as new. However, such a master would usually be busy with repairing dark gold and epic equipment. How could he possibly repair the standard equipment of the army? Therefore, every once in a while, the Spirit World Army would need to change their standard equipment. The creation of standard equipment required raw materials, manpower, and equipment. It was very difficult for a territory to gather all the necessary materials. After all, it was impossible for the territory's specialty products to cover everything. At this time, they would need to trade with other territories to obtain what they needed. This was only the equipment, and only one aspect of the territory's development. Other than that, there were also all kinds of medicinal materials needed for evolvers to break through, all kinds of rare resources needed to create special products, and so on. At this time, even Bai Xiaowen did not dare to rashly start an invasion. However, Mengchuan was like a madman. He ignored the condemnation and blockade of the territories and had no intention of withdrawing his declaration of war. Bai Xiaowen took some time to upgrade the territory's 5 elements formation to rank 3. Although he had to pay 5 epic quality elemental materials, it was worth it to strengthen the territory's defense. A rank 3 formation was the standard of a top-notch territory. With such a formation, even if the enemy invaded the territory, they would be weakened by 30%, and their allies would be strengthened by 30%. Not to mention, the different types of territory formations had different uses. Now, the Thousand Souls Jade, the source of spiritual energy, could finally be used to 100%. After upgrading the territory's formation, Bai Xiaowen was cultivating with his teammates when he suddenly received a private message. "Who is it?" Li Shi saw that Bai Xiaowen's expression was a bit strange. A person who was expected, but beyond reason, Bai Xiaowen stood up and said, "It's Xiao Xing, the Lord of Bone-Melting Territory. He asked me to meet him, and he even invited the Queen Bee. So it's him." It seems that Meng Chuan really wants to start a war. He's not bluffing. Now, Xiao Xing probably can't sit still, Qiao Rui said. "Why did he invite both our territories?" Li Shi asked. Bai Xiaowen said, "The Queen Bee has always had a good relationship with the Great Xia territory. As for me, I owe Lord Xiafeng a favor. Apart from the two of us, I'm afraid that no one else in the Great Xia territory is willing to help." This was the disadvantage of a territory that rose too quickly. It would cause many people to be wary and hope that you would fall. In addition, Xiafeng had a proud personality and wasn't as good at socializing as Bai Xiaowen. Being good at socializing with female lords was also a skill. The Great Xia territory didn't have many decent allies, and there were many potential enemies. "What do you plan to do?" Qiao Rui asked. "Of course I'm going. I have a question to ask him." Bai Xiaowen's eyes were very deep. Blue Star Evolver Platform, Arena Box. Bai Xiaowen also invited another person, Lord Candace. After all, Candace was an intelligence expert. The four of them sat down. Because of Xiao Xing's participation, the four of them exchanged some pleasantries. Xiao Xing and Candace both praised Bai Xiaowen. Recently, it could be said that he was making a lot of money. Many territories had contacted Bai Xiaowen to do business with the White Phoenix territory. Currently, in the market, the cores of chaos, evil flame materials, and other specialties were being sold in batches. The White Phoenix territory's stock also seemed to be endless. They were never sold out. Of course, Bai Xiaowen wouldn't say that this was his marketing strategy. He just laughed it off and let it go. "Overlord Xiao Xing, we all know why you called us here." Bai Xiaowen went straight to the point. He stared at Xiao Xing and said slowly, "Then, we also have a question that we hope Lord Xiao Xing can answer truthfully." Chapter 1779. I'll tell you everything I know. Xiao Xing was no longer as high-spirited as before. His young and handsome face looked a little sad because of his frown, as if he had aged a few years. For the Tanggu territory and even the entire Great Xia territory, there were not many helpers that they could count on. The White Phoenix Lord, who had suddenly emerged, was undoubtedly their biggest hope. Then again, if Bai Xiaowen had not captured a large number of high-level evolvers, including Shiryu, in the battle at the dinosaur planet's teleportation gate, causing the entire Starlink to spread rumors of his unfathomable strength, Xiao Xing would not have such high expectations for Bai Xiaowen. Looking at Bai Xiaowen's excessively young face, Xiao Xing's heart was filled with emotions. He and Shiryu were known as the twin jades among the young lords of the Starlink, but in front of this young man, this halo was more like a mockery. "Sir Xiafeng, what's the situation?" Bai Xiaowen stared into Xiao Xing's eyes, and the latter looked away unnaturally, not daring to look at him. He did not have the carefree attitude he had when they first met on the dinosaur planet. Xiao Xing was silent for a while, and then he said in a somewhat hoarse voice, "Shisu of the Great Xia territory and I have always been investigating this matter. From the intelligence channels of the World Illumination Association, we learned a little of the truth. Big Brother Xiafeng is currently being suppressed in the Great Yen territory. It really is the Great Yen territory." The Queen Bee clenched her fist and then opened it weakly. What is Sir Xiaoyan thinking? No matter what, Sir Xiafeng is still a member of Pan-Asia. Is he not afraid that Pan-Asia will fall apart? Candace said with a smile, "It's really hard to understand." Bai Xiaowen said lightly, "It's not hard to understand. Some superiors can compromise with powerful external enemies, but they are extremely displeased with the rise of subordinate forces. They do everything possible to strengthen their control. If they can't control them, they will strangle the threat. Bai Xiaowen could empathize with this point. He was born in Huaxia, and the White Phoenix territory had a natural foundation to join Pan-Asia, but Bai Xiaowen had never received an official invitation from the Pan-Asia organization. First, it was the Great Tang territory, and then it was the Tianfu territory. All of them had bad intentions towards the White Phoenix territory, but they were all old Pan-Asian territories. Bai Xiaowen didn't believe that Dian, who was at the top of the Pan-Asian pyramid, didn't know the twists and turns of this, but Xia Yan had never made an attempt to bring the White Phoenix territory to the Pan-Asian alliance. "Thank you, Lord Shaoxing, for informing me." Bai Xiaowen sighed and smiled. "I originally wanted to ask Lord Xiafeng a question, but I'm afraid I won't be able to do so now." "What is it?" "I know Big Brother Xiafeng very well, so I might know something," Shaoxing said. Candace's eyes lit up. "That's right. Lord Xiafeng and Lord Shaoxing joined the Star Alliance in the same year." Shaoxing smiled embarrassedly. "To be exact, we're a team. But I don't have Big Brother Xiafeng's insane growth rate." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. Shaoxing and Xiafeng were from the same team? A team with two lords, and Shaoxing was a commander. This was rare. Two lords meant two initial territories. This meant that Shaoxing should have an initial territory. Why could he inherit the bone collar? Could it be that he couldn't keep his initial territory? Obviously, this was the story of Shaoxing before he inherited the bone collar, formerly Xueli collar. It seemed that Shaoxing didn't want to talk about it, so Bai Xiaowen wasn't interested in digging into Shaoxing's past. Candace said, "Lord Luang, what question do you want to ask Lord Xiafeng?" "It should be the same if you ask Lord Shaoxing." Bai Xiaowen shook his head and smiled. "It's a very personal question. First, Lord Shaoxing might not know. Second, it involves Lord Xiafeng's privacy. I'll wait until I see Lord Xiafeng and ask him in person." As soon as he said this, Shaoxing was stunned, but he suddenly became excited. "Lord Luang, you mean, you have a way to save Big Brother?" The Queen Bee and Candace both frowned. Bai Xiaowen exhaled and said, "Although Lord Xiafeng is suppressed by the Great Yan territory, since the Great Xia territory hasn't changed owners, it proves that Lord Xiafeng is still fighting, and the situation hasn't fallen into an irreversible situation. But, it's too difficult to defeat the Great Yan territory with our strength." Shaoxing sighed and lowered his head. "If I had Brother Xiafeng's growth speed, I wouldn't be so helpless now." Bai Xiaowen said, "Actually, to save Lord Xiafeng, we don't have to defeat the Great Yan territory." Looking at the curious eyes of the three, Bai Xiaowen said, "The Great Yan territory has been blocking the news because they don't want this matter to be made public, right? As the leader of the Pan-Asian Alliance, once this kind of thing is confirmed, it will push the Great Yan territory to the teeth of the storm. The Queen Bee should be the most affected." The Queen Bee nodded gently. "Yes, I still feel a chill down my spine. If this matter is true, then I can only be described as disappointed in the Great Yan territory, and I even want to leave the Pan-Asian Alliance. However, this matter has not been confirmed yet." Bai Xiaowen quickly took over the conversation. "Yes, regardless of whether Lord Xiafeng's interpersonal relationships are good or bad, once this kind of thing is confirmed, I believe that many of the allied territories of the Pan-Asian Alliance will raise serious protests against the Great Yan territory. The other two organizations will also add fuel to the fire, which will be a great crisis for the Great Yan territory. What we have to do now is to find evidence that Lord Xiafeng is suppressed in the Great Yan territory and force the Great Yan territory to make a choice, whether they are willing to kill the threat of Lord Xiafeng at the cost of being alone." "Good, this is indeed a way." Shaoxing was able to become a commander-type lord, and his thinking was quite thorough. "I will immediately follow up and dig for clues from the people of the Puzhao organization who received the information before. However, before this, there is still a problem." Candace smiled. "The Tianfu territory?" "Yes." Shaoxing nodded and smiled bitterly. After all, I am only an intermediate lord. The military power of the Tanggu territory is much worse than that of the Tianfu territory. Even if the remaining military power of the Great Xia territory is added, it is still inferior. Not to mention that the Tianfu territory must have the support of the Great Yan territory. I am afraid that I can't do it alone. To be honest, this time I found Lord Lu Wang and the Queen Bee to ask for help. The Queen Bee was a little hesitant. Although she sympathized with the Great Xia territory, personal emotions could not hinder the interests of the territory. She had no plans to involve the entire Wuzhou territory in the whirlpool. Candace was even more so. She was a member of the Divine Court and was even more unwilling to meddle in other people's business. Bai Xiaowen looked at the people coming and going outside the window and said slowly, "I can help you." It is understandable that the Queen Bee and Lord Candace do not want to participate in the war. However, in the group of lords, I hope that you can help the Great Xia territory and say something fair. Chapter 1780. The Queen Bee and Candace sighed in relief, but they also felt a little embarrassed. On the other hand, Bai Xiaowen comforted them. They both had their own concerns, unlike Bai Xiaowen who didn't belong to any organization and didn't have any scruples. Bai Xiaowen was willing to help for 3 reasons. First, Xiafeng had protected White Phoenix territory. Second, Bai Xiaowen hoped to have an opportunity to communicate with Xiafeng openly. Third, Sky Manor was White Phoenix territory's enemy. Of course, this didn't mean that the Queen Bee and Candace's statements were meaningless. In Starlink, it was very important to control public opinion and maintain a righteous status. This didn't just affect the morale of the army, it also affected both sides of the war. Which side would receive more support from the other neutral territories? If 2 territories of equal strength had moral support, the other territories would be more inclined to trade resources with them and even provide them with large amounts of low-interest or interest-free spirit crystals. The other side was condemned by the public and had their trade blocked. If one side was weakened and the other side was strengthened, it was very likely that the balance of the war would tilt. Therefore, the fact that Sky Manor had casually found an excuse to start a war with Sky Manor was truly an anomaly. Xiao Xing said angrily, "Meng Chuan is so arrogant because he's relying on Great Yan territory's power. He can rely on Great Yan territory to continuously send the war resources he needs. Naturally, he doesn't care about the criticism of the other territories," Bai Xiaowen said. "Forget it, there's no point in talking about this. Great Yan territory can't just send out an army, right? At most, they'll send some logistics resources. The ones who'll really meet on the battlefield are Sky Manor's troops. If it's just dealing with Sky Manor, the Great Xia territory and Lord Lu Wang should be enough. After all, Meng Chuan is fighting away from home, and our Sky Manor's formation isn't just for show." Xiao Xing thought for a moment and said, "I even have an idea. Can Lord Lu Wang's support be carried out secretly? It would be best to wait for Meng Chuan's army to break through Sky Manor's protective shield and land on the battlefield before suddenly appearing and catching them off guard. Who knows, we might be able to capture Meng Chuan directly. He definitely has evidence of Lord Xiafeng being suppressed." The Queen Bee and Candace's eyes lit up. "That's a good idea. Lord Xiao Xing is indeed a commander-type lord." Candace praised. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said with a smile, "Sure, but it's best to discuss the details in advance so that we don't get caught." The 2 sides discussed some more details before they bid each other farewell and left quietly. According to Xiao Xing's plan, it would be best if Bai Xiaowen used the interplanar teleportation gate in advance and sent batches of troops to the Twisting Bone region to lay in ambush. When the army of the Sky Province region arrived, they would attack together. When the time came, Meng Chuan would never be able to return with the help of spatial interference devices and formations. Bai Xiaowen was more inclined to provide temporary support. When the Tianfu territory broke through the protective shield, Bai Xiaowen would rush to the Tanggu territory and would not waste much time on the way. With Bai Xiaowen around, it was equivalent to having Bai Xiaowen leading the army. This was because Bai Xiaowen could use the spiritual medium projection to send the army over. The good thing about Xiao Xing's plan was that it would save Bai Xiaowen some precious spiritual mediums and give him more time to practice. Bai Xiaowen's idea was that he could not leave the White Phoenix region for a long time. Who knew when Mengchuan would attack? If Mengchuan never came, Bai Xiaowen could not stay in the Twisting Bone region forever. In the end, Xiao Xing respected Bai Xiaowen's suggestion. 3 days later, Xiao Xing sent an urgent request for reinforcements. The interplanar teleportation gate of the Twisting Bone region was officially open to Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen had already grasped the coordinates of the Twisting Bone region. He stepped into the interplanar teleportation gate and disappeared in a flash of white light. Li Shui, Han Su, Cecilia, and the others looked at Bai Xiaowen's back with worried expressions. Captain is taking a big gamble this time. Han Su scratched his butt. Why does he care so much about the Twisting Bone region? Li Shui and Cecilia shook their heads silently. He knows there are tigers in the mountains, but he still goes there. Jinmi sighed softly and said with a smile, I heard that you risked your life to persuade Ma Chao and Chang'an City. I regret not being able to see it with my own eyes. Today, my husband went to the bone-melting region. Your bravery is even greater than before. Bai Xiaowen appeared in front of the interplanar teleportation gate of the Twisting Bone region. This place used to be called Shueli region. Now, I already have enough strength. Let the truth be revealed in front of me. Bai Xiaowen suppressed the emotions in his heart. Master Lu Wang, you're finally here. Xiao Xing was dressed in martial attire. Behind him were hundreds of territorial soldiers. He pointed at the sky nervously. The protective barrier has been breached. Bai Xiaowen looked up. The sky of the Twisting Bone region was originally blue, but now it was filled with cracks and holes of various sizes. The sky itself was an illusion. After the protective barrier was forcibly breached, one could see the universe outside through the cracks and holes. Of course, one could also see the army of Heaven's mansion descending in an orderly manner. On the ground, pillars of spiritual power shot out in an attempt to stop the army from landing. However, the army of Heaven's mansion was well trained. With their assembled formation, they resisted the attacks of the pillars of spiritual power and minimized the losses of landing. Stop attacking, save some spiritual power, Xiao Xing said helplessly. There's still some time before the enemy lands. Prepare to activate the buffs and debuffs of the territory's formation. We'll fight to the death. Then, Xiao Xing said, Master Lu Wang, please use your spirit medium to summon the troops of White Phoenix region to support us. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly and sent out a spirit medium. It landed on the ground and turned into the image of a military camp. It'll take 2 minutes. Bai Xiaowen looked at Xiao Xing's nervous expression and said with a smile, Don't worry. If Heaven's mansion only sent this amount of troops, they won't be able to return. He patted Xiao Xing's shoulder. Xiao Xing subconsciously turned and dodged Bai Xiaowen's hand. Even Xiao Xing himself was stunned when he dodged. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, Look at you, your body is stiff. Is it because you're too nervous? Xiao Xing forced a smile. Yes, I'm a little nervous. It doesn't feel good to be a traitor, right? Bai Xiaowen continued with a pleasant expression. Xiao Xing's eyes widened and his expression changed. Master Lu Wang, why do you say that? Whoosh. Whoosh. However, these figures suddenly froze in midair. An astonishing pressure spread from Bai Xiaowen's body. He suddenly exerted force and grabbed Xiao Xing's wrist. Chapter 1781. Taking a day off from Eye of Evolution. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1782. Although Xiao Xing's level and template were very strong, he was still a commander-type lord after all. His combat ability was on the weaker side. He was next to Bai Xiaowen and was stunned by Bai Xiaowen's deterrence. Then, he grabbed his wrist and felt an extremely sharp spiritual power enter his meridians, instantly paralyzing half of his body. The few Evolver experts who had just appeared from the crowd were all dressed in black and had the aura of a high-level leader. Such experts were actually hidden in the army of the Skew Bone region. However, they were all hit by Bai Xiaowen's deterrence and their movements became stiff. Of course, experts were experts after all. When the black-clothed leaders' attacks failed, they quickly used spiritual power to self-harm and dispel the subsequent effects of the deterrence's spiritual force field. The black-clothed leaders waved their hands, and the army of the Skew Bone region immediately surged forward and surrounded by Xiaowen, Xiao Xing, and the dozens of evolvers from the Great Xia dynasty. Bai Xiaowen glanced at them and knew that these black-clothed leaders were natives of the spirit realm and weren't evolvers. "What are you doing?" Xiao Xing shouted as he tried his best to circulate his spiritual power to resist the invasion of Bai Xiaowen's true inner force. This sudden change also made the dozens of evolvers from the Great Xia territory confused. "Lord Luang, is there some misunderstanding?" A young man with a sturdy build protested. Xiao Xing shouted, "Brother Gua, you have to be careful. Lu Wang didn't come with good intentions. We most likely asked the wrong person for help. He wants to cooperate with the Tianfu region to plot against us." The burly young man was called Gua Baisheng. He had a calm personality, and after hearing Xiao Xing's words, he didn't immediately believe him. Instead, he looked at Bai Xiaowen with a trace of suspicion. "Lord Luang, why? Please let go of Xiao Xing." Bai Xiaowen glanced at Gua Baisheng. This person was a level 18 leader, and his aura was as steady as a mountain. He couldn't be underestimated. The evolvers of the Galactic Alliance weren't completely focused on templates. The same hero class could have a huge difference in strength. Some hero classes' combat power was even stronger than a lord's, while some hero class could not even compare to a rare elite. Among Lord-ranked evolvers, the difference in strength was even greater. For example, Xia Feng and Shi Yu, who were both high-ranked Lord-ranked evolvers, could not be compared at all. Bai Xiaowen could tell from this man's spiritual aura that exceeded Baisheng that he was probably one of the pillars of Great Xia after Xia Xiafeng's disappearance. As such, the dozens of evolvers around Gua Baisheng should be from Great Xia and were still loyal to Xia Xiafeng. Bai Xiaowen quickly divided the people present into two groups. One group was led by Xiao Xing, who had already confirmed that he had betrayed Xiafeng. The other group was led by Gua Baisheng, who had no idea of Xiao Xing's betrayal. Xiao Xing's faction that surrendered, including the army of the Bone region that Xiao Xing had won over, were mostly natives. Gua Baisheng's faction that was loyal to Great Xia were all evolvers who had rushed over to support the resistance of the Bone region. They were basically all evolvers. Bai Xiaowen's super brain only took 0.1 seconds to figure out from the chaotic situation that the two factions were not completely united. After some planning, he immediately changed his original plan. Xiao Xing betrayed Xiafeng. Bai Xiaowen's short words stunned all the evolvers of Great Xia. "You're slandering me!" Xiao Xing shouted. Even Gua Baisheng and the others' eyes were filled with disbelief. After all, Bai Xiaowen was just an outsider, while Xiao Xing had followed Xiafeng for many years. Bai Xiaowen smiled. "Xiao Xing, I originally did not need to explain so much to you. After all, this kind of thing is based on one's own free will. Your words revealed a flaw that made me suspicious. I could have used force to suppress you and everyone here, but I didn't expect there to be people loyal to Lord Xiafeng in the Bone region. Then, I'll spend some time to tell you the whole story." After pausing for a moment, Bai Xiaowen continued, "Xiao Xing, you told me before that Lord Xiafeng was suppressed in the Great Yan region, right?" Xiao Xing gritted his teeth and did not reply, but Gua Baisheng and the others nodded. Gua Baisheng said, "That's right." Xiao Xing said so. Bai Xiaowen said, "Just from this point, I can tell that Xiao Xing's words are not true. Lord Xiafeng is not an idiot. How could he go to the Great Yan region?" Xiao Xing shouted, "How would I know the whole story? I also bought the information." Bai Xiaowen followed up, where did you buy the information from? Who was the middleman? Xiao Xing paused. Just as he was thinking of making up a lie or two, Bai Xiaowen cut him off and said indifferently, I know a few lords who do intelligence business in the Starlink. They also paid a considerable price to find traces of Lord Xiafeng. However, none of them mentioned that Lord Xiafeng was suppressed in the Great Yan region. Xiao Xing gritted his teeth and said, Big Brother Xiafeng's disappearance must have something to do with the Great Yan region. Other than the Great Yan region, who else can suppress him? Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, That's right. Lord Xiafeng's disappearance is related to the Great Yan region, but he might not be in the Great Yan region. Bai Xiaowen looked at Guo Baixing and said slowly, with Lord Xiafeng's quick-wittedness, it's impossible for him to set foot in the Great Yan region alone. Xiao Xing might say that Lord Xiafeng was captured and brought to the Great Yan region, but this is even more impossible because the boundary steel of the Great Xiao region hasn't changed owners yet. This means that Lord Xiafeng hasn't fallen into the enemy's hands and couldn't have been killed. Guo Baixing had a suspicious expression. Lord Luang, where do you think Lord Xiafeng is? Bai Xiaowen said, I think that there must be a mole in order for Lord Xiafeng to fall into the trap. Think about it, if Xiao Xing invited Lord Xiafeng to the Melting Bone region, but set up a large number of experts in the territory and suppressed them with the territory's great formation. Wouldn't it be difficult for Lord Xiafeng to escape? As soon as these words came out, the expressions of all the evolvers present changed. Xiao Xing originally wanted to speak, but his meridians had already been completely invaded by Bai Xiaowen's true inner force. The powerful true inner force directly sealed the acupoints on his throat, making it impossible for him to speak. Guo Baixing didn't care about Xiao Xing's predicament. He looked at Bai Xiaowen and said, Lord Luang, although what you said is possible, we still lack evidence. Bai Xiaowen smiled. I've already said that this is a free testimony. If you ask me for evidence, I can't take it out right now. Some of the people present started to discuss again. A few evolvers with ulterior motives even shouted that there was no evidence and that they were trying to sow discord. Bai Xiaowen changed the topic. However, there is an ironclad evidence, but it's not here. What ironclad evidence? Guo Baixing asked. The experts that the Council of the Heavenly Province first set up ambushes in the Melting Bone region to ambush me. Does this count as ironclad evidence? Bai Xiaowen smiled. Perhaps there are a few experts from the Great Yan region among them. Chapter 1783. A trace of shock flashed through the depths of Xiao Xing's eyes. For a moment, he looked at Bai Xiaowen as if he was looking at a ghost. Although Xiao Xing had forced himself to calm down and managed his expression well, not revealing his shocked expression in front of Guo Baixing and the others, Bai Xiaowen had been holding onto his wrist the entire time. He could see every minute detail of his breathing, heartbeat, and blood flow. Bai Xiaowen had clearly captured that moment of shock. Guo Baixing and the others were also shocked. If what Bai Xiaowen said was true, and Xiao Xing had really arranged for experts from the Sky Province territory and even the Great Yan territory to prepare an ambush, it would at least prove that Xiao Xing and the Sky Province territory were in cahoots. Taking into account the terrible relationship between Xiafeng, the Sky Province territory, and the Great Yan territory, it could be confirmed that Xiao Xing had indeed become a traitor and betrayed Xiafeng. Lord Luang, do you have any proof that Xiao Xing and the Sky Province territory are in cahoots and have experts ambushed in their territory? Guo Baixing asked. Bai Xiaowen said, Actually, I don't need to find the evidence. Bai Xiaowen took 2 steps forward and pointed at the Sky Province territory's army that had already successfully landed. Xiao Xing and the Sky Province territory's original plan was to lure me here and capture me with the help of the territory's formation and experts, just like how they suppressed Lord Xiafeng. Since I made a name for myself on the dinosaur planet, Xiao Xing and the Sky Province territory must have made ample preparations. They definitely didn't just send these cannon fodder troops. Guo Baixing nodded. The name for myself on the dinosaur planet that Bai Xiaowen spoke of was his battle record of defeating hundreds of evolvers and capturing Shiryu alive. It was this battle record that had sent Bai Xiaowen to the position of a top expert in the Interstellar Alliance, comparable to Xia Feng. This was also the main reason why the Great Xia territory had recruited Bai Xiaowen as their hidden aide. The Sky Province territory's army in front of them seemed to number in the thousands. Most of them were natives, and there were about 200 evolvers. The leader was Meng Chuan himself. Such a lineup was indeed not enough to keep Bai Xiaowen. Because of this, Bai Xiaowen deduced that a large number of masters must have been lying in ambush in the Twisted Bone region. They were only waiting for a signal to be sent out, and then they would besiege the Twisted Bone region. The person who sent this signal was undoubtedly Xiao Xing. However, Xiao Xing had already been restrained by Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen saw that Bai Xing had understood the meaning of his words, so he continued, "So, there's no need to look for evidence. Those experts from the Tianfu territory and even the Deyan territory are hiding nearby, waiting for the signal. Even if there's no signal, once we start fighting with the Tianfu territory's army, they'll definitely jump out." The Heavenly Province's army pressed forward very quickly. Guo Baisheng and the other evolvers from the loyal faction all clenched their weapons. However, the 400 or so Xiao Xing's troops, who were natives, kept their eyes fixed on Xiao Xing. It was as if they would charge forward and engage in a civil war at the slightest disagreement. "The enemy is right in front of us. Let's retreat first." Guo Baisheng yelled at one of the native leaders. The native leader straightened his neck and said, "I only obey Lord Xiao Xing's orders." He turned his head and shouted at Bai Xiaowen, "Let go of Lord Xiao Xing, or the Xiaogu army won't be polite." He really wanted to snatch Xiao Xing, but after comparing his strength with Bai Xiaowen's, he felt that there was little hope, so he didn't act rashly. Guo Baisheng looked at Bai Xiaowen and asked, "Lord Lu Wang, what should we do?" Bai Xiaowen said, "Before I came, I had a simple idea. As long as we quickly rush to the Xiaogu territory's boundary stone and kill Xiao Xing, we can directly seize the boundary stone. I have some knowledge of formations, so I can quickly control the Xiaogu territory's defensive formation. When the time comes, I can activate the formation and summon the White Phoenix territory's army. Even if the enemy is twice as strong, we can still deal with them." "That won't do. After all, Lord Lu Wang's words haven't been confirmed yet." Without seeing any evidence, Guo Baisheng didn't want to kill Xiao Xing even though he suspected him. A head wasn't a leak. If Bai Xiaowen cut it off, it wouldn't grow back. Bai Xiaowen frowned. If Guo Baisheng and the others joined Sky Manor territory and Great Yan territory and became enemies, it would be easy for him to deal with them. After killing Xiao Xing and seizing the boundary stone, he could just beat Guo Baisheng and the others together. But now, Guo Baisheng and the others were still loyal to Xia Feng, so Bai Xiaowen couldn't treat them as enemies and act recklessly. "All right. I have a compromise. I'll temporarily control Xiao Xing." Bai Xiaowen revealed a mysterious smile, then quickly retracted it. "I have a talisman technique that can temporarily control a person's thoughts. After controlling Xiao Xing and winning this battle, I'll set him free. How about it?" Guo Baisheng was moved. Although this method was somewhat unfair to Xiao Xing, from Lu Wang's point of view, it seemed to be the biggest compromise. Otherwise, with Lu Wang's strength, no one would be able to stop him from killing Xiao Xing. Actually, Guo Baisheng and Xiao Xing had known each other for many years. He, Xia Feng, and Xiao Xing had been allies in a 5-man team. They had gone through great unification together. Now, only the 3 of them were left in that 5-man team. In terms of feelings, Guo Baisheng and Xiao Xing were naturally very close. But it was precisely because of this that Guo Baisheng could recognize Xiao Xing more clearly. They were all old teammates. Xiao Xing's attitude towards Xia Feng was extremely warm, but he gradually drifted away from his big brother Guo Baisheng. Wasn't the reason because he was a lord and looked down on Guo Baisheng, who was a hero? From Guo Baisheng's point of view, he naturally couldn't stand Xiao Xing's attitude of stepping on the weak. He also gradually felt that Xiao Xing wasn't reliable. But because of their friendship, he didn't say anything to Xia Feng. "Lord Lu Wang, you can temporarily control Xiao Xing, but if Xiaoxing is proven innocent, please keep your promise and set him free, Guo Baixing said in a low voice. Bai Xiaowen didn't understand Guo Baixing's thoughts. But since Guo Baixing agreed to do this, Bai Xiaowen wouldn't ask too much. Now wasn't the time. Don't worry, I'm a man of my word. Bai Xiaowen silently added in his heart, after Xiaoxing's control was removed and he was free, whether he lived or died had nothing to do with Bai Xiaowen. He felt a bit guilty for deceiving Guo Baixing like this, but it was an emergency. Bai Xiaowen didn't want to fight Guo Baixing, and he was also in a hurry to beat back Heaven's Land's army, so he could only do this. Brother Guo, why did you agree? You're stupid. Xiaoxing struggled to control his spirit energy and temporarily broke through Bai Xiaowen's restriction on his throat. Guo Baixing said calmly, Xiaoxing, we still don't know if you colluded with outsiders to assassinate Lord Xiaofeng, but the information you provided is too suspicious. It's enough to make you suspicious. Now, I'll let Lord Luwang control you temporarily and beat back the enemy. If you're really loyal to Great Xia, then order your private army to listen to my orders and fight the enemy. In your dreams. Xiaoxing said angrily. He looked at Bai Xiaowen and said, you with the surname Lu, you and I are both Lord Templates, and I'm even a high-level Lord. I want to see if your damn talisman can control me. Hee. You're not hiding your strength anymore? Bai Xiaowen smiled. Xiaoxing's true realm was already level 17, a high-level Lord. But when he asked for help, he said that he was a mid-level Lord. This was why Bai Xiaowen was suspicious of him. However, there was no need to explain it to Guo Baixing and the others. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath. A pure black energy slowly circled around his fingertips and formed a talisman. Death God's Power, Peace Talisman, Bewitching Talisman. Chapter 1784. This was Bai Xiaowen's first attempt at controlling a Lord-tier powerhouse using the Peaceful Ho, Bewitching Mantra charm. Bai Xiaowen knew his limits. His true inner force gave him the potential to become a king, but it was impossible to control an overlord with a talisman made of true inner force. Controlling a lord was tantamount to controlling everything about the other party, including the other party's identity, status, and forces. The benefits one could obtain were shockingly huge. From a balanced perspective, the spiritual realm's rules wouldn't allow the success rate of mind control to be too high. There had to be harsh conditions. In a battle between a king and a lord, 1 point of priority advantage was nothing. In the Dark Age plane, when Bai Xiaowen controlled an overlord, he had first killed the overlord, then used the Dark Resurrection method to make the overlord serve him. Now that he was controlling Xiaoxing, Bai Xiaowen decided to use the power of the Death God to be safe. Death's power was at least a level higher than true inner force. It might even be higher than a god's descendant's power. After all, a god's descendant should be between a king and a true god. There was still a gap between them and a true god. Death's power originated from the god of death. It was a true god's power. The black talisman's power attacked Xiaoxing's mind like a hot knife through butter. Xiaoxing never expected Bai Xiaowen's talisman attack to be so fierce. He felt like he had lost himself. His face flushed red, and he used all his strength to resist. Bai Xiaowen quickly took over most of Xiaoxing's mind. He went straight for the core area of the mind, the beer. The beer was where Xiaoxing's consciousness was. It was also his last fortress. Here, he encountered strong resistance from Xiaoxing. If the mind was the capital of a country, then the beer was the inner court of the royal palace, the administrative center. As long as he took over the beer and sent a strand of his spiritual sense into it, he could turn Xiaoxing into a puppet. This was the fundamental principle of the bewitching talisman. When he was awakened, Bai Xiaowen only used the bewitching talisman's inherent program to activate the skill. Now that his knowledge had deepened, he could dissect the principle of the skill. Now that Bai Xiaowen had occupied Xiaoxing's sea of consciousness, he was able to control Xiaoxing's actions. However, since he failed to occupy the beer, it meant that he could not easily withdraw his troops. Otherwise, Xiao Xing's telegnosis ability would have a chance to launch a counterattack and regain control of itself. Bai Xiaowen sighed inwardly. Controlling a lord, especially a commander-type lord, was not an easy task. Even if he relied on the power of the Grim Reaper, he could only achieve half control. Next, he couldn't withdraw his spiritual awareness. He had to leave a considerable amount of energy in Xiao Xing's sea of consciousness to maintain the pressure on the beer. This was the only way to ensure that Xiao Xing couldn't retaliate. However, this was enough. Bai Xiaowen immediately manipulated Xiao Xing to grant him the secondary authority to control the boundary marker of the skewed bone territory. This secondary authority included the right to control the bone-melting region's formation. Subsequently, Bai Xiaowen continued to divide a portion of his spiritual awareness to maintain his control over Xiao Xing's sea of consciousness and the suppression of his spiritual altar. The rest of his spiritual awareness quickly entered the bone-melting ridge's formation. There was a branch of immortal arts, talisman refining technique. Bai Xiaowen grasped the bone-melting region's formation very quickly. In just a few short seconds, he grasped that the bone-melting region's formation was actually a 7 stars type formation. Compared to the White Phoenix region's 5 elements formation, it was even more strange and dangerous. However, it was not as stable. Just from the choice of the territory's formation, he seemed to be able to see some of Xiao Xing's characteristics. He should be an evolver who liked to gamble. When he won, he would be unrestrained and unrestrained. When he lost, he would be completely naked. The bone-melting region's formation had a total of 7 formation bases. Once the bone-melting region's formation was activated, the 7 formation bases would evolve into 5,040 formation positions. These positions would be mapped to the entire bone-melting region, transforming into 5,040 small formation areas. According to the different combinations of the formation bases, each small formation area would receive varying degrees of buff and debuff. The bone-melting region's formation was the same as the White Phoenix region's. It had already been upgraded to the 3rd level. The range of buff and debuff effects could reach up to 70%. However, the weakest area was infinitely close to 0. These 5,040 small formation areas were not unchanging. They would constantly change under the control of the person in charge of the formation. Complex and changeable was also a major characteristic of strange formations. However, if the enemy also had a master proficient in formations, they could command the army to seize advantageous positions and minimize the effects on themselves. If the person in charge of the bone-melting region's formation wasn't skilled enough, the enemy could even turn the tables and seize the initiative. This would cause the bone-melting region's army to fall into a disadvantage. This was the disadvantage of a strange formation like the 7 stars formation. It was far less stable than the 5 elements formation. However, Bai Xiaowen's formation skills were not a problem for him to preside over the 7 stars formation. At the very least, he wouldn't let the enemy seize the initiative. After understanding the principles of the formation, he directly chose to activate the formation and change the gravity of the region where the Heavenly Province's army was located. This caused their charging speed to abruptly decrease. What's going on? The Heavenly Province's army was in chaos. Meng Chuan, who was standing in the middle of the army, was also bewildered. Logically speaking, the bone-melting region's formation should only target Bai Xiaowen and the small group of evolvers loyal to the Great Xia territory. Lord Mengchuan, this is bad. Look, Lord Xiao Xing seems to have been subdued by LV Wang. An evolver commander beside him said. Useless fellow. Mengchuan was frustrated. What do we do? Several evolvers looked at Mengchuan. What else can we do? Fortunately, we made sufficient preparations. We really can't underestimate LV Wang, Mengchuan grumbled. He took out a small ball of white light, squeezed it hard, and threw it into the air. With a loud boom, the small ball exploded into a rainbow-colored rain of light. This was a signal ball used to besiege the enemy. Xiao Xing also had one on him, but he didn't have the time to release it. Swoosh! Swoosh! Figures flew out from the east, west, north, and south. They flew toward Bai Xiaowen and Xiao Xing. Don't let LV Wang go. It's best to capture them alive, but there's no harm in killing them. Every black figure had a powerful aura, and there were more than a dozen of them. The leaders among them all had the aura of a high-rank lord. What? Guo Baisheng and the others widened their eyes. The experts lying in ambush here undoubtedly confirmed Bai Xiaowen's words. Xiao Xing really was colluding with the enemy. Guo Baisheng and the others glared at Xiao Xing angrily. They wanted nothing more than to bite off a piece of his flesh. However, Xiao Xing had already lost the ability to receive information from the outside world. He was still bitterly guarding the last trace of clarity in his soul so that he wouldn't be completely controlled by Bai Xiaowen. At this time, Bai Xiaowen's spirit medium had successfully summoned the first White Phoenix army. Chapter 1785. Bai Xiaowen's spirit medium projection had been prepared a long time ago. His total spiritual energy was as high as 4,200 points, which was comparable to a level 17 king. His high crystal count spirit medium projection was twice as fast as a normal high-level lord. The reason why he hadn't activated it even though he was prepared was because he was waiting for the enemy to reveal their trump card. He didn't want to scare Mengchuan away and scare the Sky Province and Great Expansion experts into hiding. Now that the ambush experts had appeared, Guo Baisheng and the others could wholeheartedly trust Bai Xiaowen. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen didn't delay any longer and directly opened the projection door, allowing the long-prepared army of White Phoenix territory to cross over. It wasn't quite appropriate to call it an army because the first to step out of the projection door was an ugly demon lord covered in green flames. Then, one demon lord after another appeared. This wasn't an army, but a group of top-level experts formed by 13 demon lords. This. Guo Baisheng's eyes widened when he saw 13 demon lords. The combat strength of White Phoenix territory's higher-ups was a bit too terrifying. However, after the 13th demon lord appeared, the projection door didn't close. A slender and beautiful leg that was almost 3 meters long with goat hooves stepped out of the door. The King of Pride, Arigant, ducked out of the projection door with the aura of a high-level king. Bai Xiaowen didn't stop and released a second spirit medium projection. The first spirit medium projection summoned the top-level experts of White Phoenix territory to fight against the Sky Province and Great Expansion experts that were ambushing Bai Xiaowen. At the same time, it delayed the attack of Sky Province's army. The second spirit medium projection summoned the well-trained army of White Phoenix territory. This was the only way to display Bai Xiaowen's outstanding command ability. Of course, with the current strength of the enemy, the first spirit medium projection's lineup of 13 demon lords and the King of Pride was enough to win. However, Bai Xiaowen also had a plan to take over Bone Province, so he chose to send more troops. Xiao Xing's army, which had been recruited by Xiao Xing, was horrified when they saw this scene. They were natives, and although they were loyal to Xiao Xing, their loyalty was not more important than their lives. Seeing the 5-meter-tall Pride King in front of them, the leaderless army of the sorrowful Bone region fled in all directions. Bai Xiaowen did not care about their escape. As the saying went, the monk could run, but the temple could not. He turned his hand and set the teleportation gate of the Twisting Bone Ridge to a no-go state. Naturally, the Twisting Bone Ridge became an isolated island. When the bone-melting army, Guo Baisheng, and the others saw the King of Pride, Aliganti, their first reaction was shock. As for the invading army and the experts lying in ambush, their first reaction was fear. Aliganti took a step forward. His 5-meter-tall demonic body seemed to have teleported. He stood in front of the ambushers charging at Bai Xiaowen. "In the name of the Demon King, I bestow death upon you." Aliganti's eyes flashed with red light. He formed a seal with both hands to support his chanting. A black ring shot out and enveloped several experts. Instant death spell. "Get out of the way." A thin, middle-aged evolver in the distance, who seemed to be quite knowledgeable, shouted. The experts who were enveloped reacted half a beat slower. Their consciousness seemed to have been disturbed. By the time they recovered and wanted to dodge, it was already too late. With a grunt, the two experts in the center of the black ring died silently. Their bodies fell to the ground below. The other two experts dodged a little faster and dodged half a body's distance away. But the part of their body that was enveloped by the black ring seemed to have been paralyzed. Alleganti let out an evil laugh, and his sharp claws swept through the air. 3 streams of green flames were like sharp scythes, cutting the 2 survivors into 12 pieces from a distance of more than 100 feet. The 13 demon lords were not idle either. They each drew their weapons, flapped their wings, or shot out their dark powers. They intercepted the ambushing experts from Tianfu and Dian and slaughtered them all. The evolvers who were chosen to ambush Bai Xiaowen were all below the hero class. But against the demon lords, the hero class was still not enough. Even if they were not killed instantly, they would still have to flee like rabbits chased by eagles. There were also a few top experts who could fight one-on-one with the demon lords without being at a disadvantage. The thin, middle-aged evolver who had shouted to break the death spell and asked people to dodge was even fighting 1 against 2. He used a long sword. The blade of the sword surged like a raging wave, and the 2 demon lords were forced to retreat. Xia Jincheng. That's Xia Jincheng from Dian. Guo Baixing shouted. There are indeed experts from Dian participating this time. Bai Xiaowen glanced at him. Xia Jincheng was a level 18 fighter lord, and his combat expertise was very high. No wonder he could suppress 2 demon lords at the same time. He thought of something and said, Alleganti, Demon's Eye. Alleganti waved his hand and took out a dark green eyeball. After infusing it with dark energy, the eyeball quickly enlarged and rose into the sky, overlooking everything on the battlefield. The Demon's Eye was a specialty of the Dark Age realm. It was similar to Lord Candace's Eye of the Forest, an observation post. Moreover, the Demon's Eye could also store images, forming photo-like images. This could be used as evidence that Dian was targeting the Great Xia. Once it was thrown out, Dian's image in the Galactic Alliance would plummet. At this moment, Bai Xiaowen suddenly felt a chill all over his body. The next moment, a white line shot out like lightning, heading straight for Bai Xiaowen's heart. Bai Xiaowen reacted quickly. After having a bad feeling, he immediately took out the silver throne. The white line shot into the silver throne and nailed into it with a clang. It was a sharp silver awl. The silver throne was a divine artifact, and its material was extraordinary. The fact that the silver awl could pierce through a divine artifact was enough to show its amazing strength and penetrating power. If Bai Xiaowen's reaction had been half a beat slower, there would have been a bloody hole in his heart. Bai Xiaowen quickly sat on the throne and activated his spiritual energy shield. The next second, a short man in black appeared where the silver awl was. He held a silver awl in each hand and stabbed at Bai Xiaowen's temples. With 2 muffled buzzing sounds, the spiritual energy shield shook. But the silver awl could not pierce through Bai Xiaowen's spiritual energy shield. Impermanence Awl. The second assassin of the Galactic Alliance, Qi Zheng. Guo Baixing was knowledgeable and exposed the short man in black. Bai Xiaowen reached out and grabbed at the air. The 7 Fiends' palm, which had doubled its power, quickly pinched at Qi Zheng. Qi Zheng felt the air around him stagnate. Knowing that it was powerful, he immediately fled. The 7 Fiends' palm crushed a piece of deadwood into a pile of sawdust. Chapter 1786. Qi Zheng activated the substitute puppet skill and dodged the attack, his figure disappearing. With Bai Xiaowen's 7 fiendish palm, doubled in power, there were only a handful of lord-ranked experts who could escape from his grasp. Not to mention, he had the Qi cultivation technique to boost the power of his first strike. Not just anyone could escape from Bai Xiaowen's hands by using spells like substitute puppet. If it were anyone else, they would find it difficult to even breathe under the pressure and wouldn't be able to use an escape technique. Qi Zheng's ability to escape was proof that the second assassin of the Interstellar Alliance was very good. His substitute puppet skill had to be at least proficient. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and scanned the battlefield with his spiritual sense, but he didn't find Qizeng after his second invisibility. The reason is that I've used up some of my spiritual sense on Xiaoxing. Bai Xiaowen abruptly withdrew his spiritual sense from Xiaoxing's sea of consciousness and slammed his palm across Xiaoxing's neck, knocking him out. At the same time, he injected a wisp of the power of the Grim Reaper into Xiaoxing's body, temporarily restraining his spiritual power. Bai Xiaowen had already obtained secondary authority over the Seven Stars formation of the Twisted Bone Ridge, so Xiaoxing was useless. The reason he hadn't killed Xiaoxing, but imprisoned him instead, was because the boundary steel of the Twisted Bone Ridge would become ownerless. If someone else took over the Twisted Bone Ridge and took back Bai Xiaowen's secondary authority, it would be self-defeating. The boundary steel wasn't here, and even if it was, there would be a lot of controversy over how to deal with it. Although Guo Baisheng and the others were convinced of Xiaoxing's guilt, they weren't willing to let Bai Xiaowen take over the Twisted Bone Ridge. Therefore, it was best to stun Xiaoxing and make him immobile. After withdrawing all of his spiritual sense, Bai Xiaowen's sensitivity to the outside world increased more than twofold. With the help of the heart-fostering technique, his spiritual sense scanned the battlefield again like the most sensitive radar. This time, the invisible Qizeng couldn't escape Bai Xiaowen's gaze. Qizeng was also skilled in daring. He actually hid underground. Bai Xiaowen sat on the silver throne and hovered at a low altitude. The straight-line distance between Qizeng and Bai Xiaowen was less than 50 meters. Despite being so close to him, he hadn't discovered him even with half of his spiritual sense scanning. Qizeng's concealment ability was indeed impressive. Coupled with the powerful ability of the Hammer of Impermanence, Qizeng was truly worthy of being one of the top assassins in the Constellation Alliance. Assassins would forever be the nemesis of control-type evolvers. Of course, Bai Xiaowen would not let go of such a dangerous person. He pretended that he didn't notice Qizeng, but he secretly activated the Seven Stars Great Array. After the Seven Stars transformation, the small area where Qizeng was located in the array formation changed 3 times, and the negative effects began to appear. Bai Xiaowen abruptly activated it. Qizeng, who was hiding underground, immediately felt that the surrounding soil was as hard as steel. It also felt like a board of nails was crazily pressing against him. Although this kind of pressure was not fatal to Qizeng, it would only reduce his movement speed by 30%. But to an assassin, speed was life. Once he slowed down, the enemy's attacks would follow him like a shadow. Although Bai Xiaowen's 7 Evil's great palm didn't catch Qizeng's body, the terrifying power overflowing from it already made Qizeng tremble in fear. This was the first time he had encountered such a monster-level opponent. He was clearly a control-type evolver. He was clearly only at level 16. Why did his casual attack have the power of a mountain? It was almost as heavy as a high-level king-level powerhouse's. A monster. An absolute monster. When he felt the heavy pressure, Qizeng didn't hesitate and immediately rushed out from underground. He knew that if he appeared rashly, he would definitely be attacked. So the moment he rushed out of the ground, he immediately changed directions and rushed 7 to 8 meters away. Whoosh! A thin bolt of lightning fell from above. The lightning's landing point was precisely the direction Qizeng was rushing toward. If he didn't change directions or stop, he would definitely be hit. It must be mentioned here that with the lightning's speed, Qizeng naturally couldn't see where it would land. But for a high-level evolver like Qizeng who had experienced hundreds of battles, at least one of his combat specializations had long surpassed the expert level. He had an almost clairvoyant instinct when it came to dangerous factors. In an instant, Qizeng instinctively felt a warning in his heart. He felt a sense of impending doom. Qizeng immediately chose to change directions. This time, he could move 5 meters horizontally. However, there was another whoosh, and the same feeling of impending doom enveloped him again. Qizeng could only change directions again. This was also his last short-distance change. The multiple bursts of rapid changes had almost bruised his bones and fascia. So, in the eyes of others, this strange scene appeared. Bai Xiaowen sat on the throne. His fingers constantly pointed, and a thin bolt of lightning fell from each point. However, the lightning wasn't aimed at Qi Zheng. Instead, it was aimed at different directions around Qi Zheng. It was either in front of him or to the side of him. All of them landed on empty air. Qi Zheng's movements were even more difficult to understand. He madly changed directions and sprinted in the air, but every time he sprinted, he would forcefully stop himself. He was like a trapped beast struggling in a cage. However, this cage couldn't be seen or touched. It only existed in Qi Zheng's heart. To actually be able to complete 3 sprints in the air in such a critical moment. His agility is really amazing. His combat specialization must have reached an unimaginable level. Bai Xiaowen commented. In his eyes, Qi Zheng's entire body was like a transparent diagram of a human body. His bones, tendons, and even the circulation of spiritual power in his meridians were all clearly visible. So, Qi Zheng's seemingly abrupt changes in direction were all within Bai Xiaowen's predictions. Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen had the Eye of Evolution and the super brain. He could predict where the skill would land based on Qi Zheng's movements. Otherwise, with Bai Xiaowen's meditation specialization, which had yet to reach the expert level, it would be a fool's dream to want to increase the accuracy of his single-target spells. Seeing that Qi Zheng's fascia showed signs of bruising and that he didn't continue to change directions, Bai Xiaowen's next lightning strike naturally hit Qi Zheng's head without hesitation. This time, Qi Zheng wasn't prepared in advance. Of course, he couldn't use the substitution puppet technique to dodge this attack. He could only rely on his spiritual power to protect his body and take it head-on. When an assassin could only take the enemy's attack head-on, they weren't far from death. The thin lightning bolt penetrated Qi Zheng's spiritual power protection. A small amount of power entered his body, causing his hair to stand on end. The black cloth and headscarf covering his face fell to the ground like black butterflies. Not only did the lightning strike break through his defense, but it also had a paralyzing effect. Bai Xiaowen quickly followed up with 3 more lightning strikes. Although the damage of the 3 weakened lightning strikes couldn't compare to the damage of a proper primordial lightning bolt, the best way to deal with an agile assassin was to ensure that the damage would hit its target. The only advantage of the lightning strike over the primordial lightning was that it could be launched faster by a thought, as if it was an instinctive action. For Bai Xiaowen, a thought didn't even take 0.1 seconds. But sometimes, it was precisely this little bit of time that gave the enemy a little more opportunity to escape. The 3 thin lightning bolts were almost connected head to tail and injected into Qi Zheng's head in sequence. That's right, it was injected and not split. Bai Xiaowen's control of his spiritual power was abnormally precise. He didn't waste a single bit of the lightning's power, especially when Qi Zheng's protective spiritual power had already been broken. The 3 lightning bolts only made a small hole in Qi Zheng's head. All the power was injected into it, and it was like mercury flowing into the ground. Qi Zheng's body stiffened, and he didn't move at all. Green smoke curled up from his ears and nostrils. With a thud, Qi Zheng's short body fell to the ground. The second-ranked assassin of the Star Alliance had lost his life in his first encounter with Bai Xiaowen. Chapter 1787. While Bai Xiaowen was killing Qi Zheng, the 13 demon lords and the King of Pride, Alleganti, were not idling. According to Qi Zheng's idea, Arrogant and the other demon lords would most likely rush over to save Bai Xiaowen, who was the leader, after being attacked by an assassin. This would give them time to make arrangements. This was a brilliant strategy of attacking Wei to save Zhao. However, Qi Zheng had miscalculated 2 things. First, he had underestimated Bai Xiaowen's combat strength and was killed. Second, Alleganti and the other demons did not care about Bai Xiaowen's life or death. They only cared about the fun of fighting, or rather, the fun of killing. In the eyes of the demons, if Bai Xiaowen was killed, it could only mean one thing: Bai Xiaowen was too weak and did not have the qualifications to lead them. Alagandi was already fighting with the army of Heaven's Mansion. Although he was proficient in soul attacks, Alagandi was also skilled in both close combat and long-range combat. With his powerful physique and spiritual energy, he could easily send evolvers flying with a wave of his hand. None of them were a match for him. The commander of Heaven's Mansion was called Yu Hong, and he was a level 18 hero. He controlled an army of 200 people and used spiritual energy concretion to create a yellow spiritual giant. Only then did he barely block Alagandi's close combat attacks. In fact, Alagandi's close combat was his weakest link. He only used it to conserve spiritual energy. The people of Heaven's Mansion thought that after using spiritual energy concretion to stall Alagandi, the evolvers and natives would be able to use long-range attacks and defeat Alagandi like he was a boss. What they didn't know was that Arrogant had an immortal body in the Dark Age dimension. He had only become a demon king after experiencing hundreds of battles. How could he possibly be defeated by a team like a boss with low intelligence? A group confusion spell was thrown out, and a large number of natives below elite level, and even some evolvers, lost their minds for a short period of time. They started attacking their allies around them. Although the group confusion spell only affected a small number of people, it was a destructive blow to the order and morale of the army of Heaven's Mansion. Immediately after, Alagandi used the Soul Annihilation Ripple spell, which was the black circle spell he used at the beginning, and cursed another batch of Heaven's Mansion troops. Meng Chuan was on the verge of cursing out loud when he heard this. Who knew that a high-level demon king would suddenly appear? Even if Heaven's Mansion wanted to challenge such a powerhouse during their exploration of the spirit realm, they would need to plan a lot and find his weakness. Then, they would need to organize an elite army and attack him. It was too much of a bug for such a powerhouse to appear in the middle of a territorial war. More importantly, Meng Chuan did not know Alagandi's fighting style. If he knew that Alagandi was good at soul attacks, he would have prepared some soul protection treasures, spells, and the like in advance. It was much better than being unprepared now. Fortunately, there were experts from Heavens of. Seeing the sorry state of the Tianfu Territories army, one of the Great Yen Territories experts who were fighting the 13 Fiend Lords immediately flew out after a short discussion and joined up with the Tianfu Territories army. As the young man chanted, 2 beams of light fell on the Heavenly Province army's head. Group Dispel. Soul Protection Barrier. The confusion spell of Heaven's Mansion was dispelled, and with the protection of the Soul Protection Barrier, they finally had a layer of protection against Alagandi's soul attacks. Although this layer of protection was not much different from cardboard, Alagandi had no way to take advantage of it. There are so many talents in Heaven's Mansion. Xia Jincheng. He suppressed 2 demon lords in a head-on battle. Qi Zeng, the second-ranked assassin of the Starlink Alliance. Also, there's this young evolver in front of me. He's actually a support-type lord. I wonder if he's a pure support type or a control type. Support-type lords were extremely rare. They were much rarer than main types such as commander type, fighter type, and curse type. And when dealing with certain powerful beings of the spiritual realm, the support of the feudal lord was crucial. Just like now, when dealing with the King Arigant who specialized in soul attacks, without this youth, the Heavenly Province army would only be slaughtered. But with this youth, the Heavenly Province army would at least have the strength to fight. Of course, Bai Xiaowen would not sit back and watch the battle. In addition to controlling the 7 Stars formation to put pressure on Heaven's Mansion, he also began to use long-range magic attacks to support Alagandi. A snake-shaped lightning bolt shot out and wriggled through the crowd. Miserable cries could be heard. The transformation of primordial lightning, snake lightning, allowed this single-target skill to have some characteristics of group spells. This special effect of snake lightning seems to have appeared in accordance with the characteristics of lightning. Snake lightning extends irregularly and is always attracted by the electric charge on the person closest to it. Every time it passes by a person, the power of snake lightning decreases. Is it because the positive and negative electric charges cancel each other out? Bai Xiaowen muttered to himself. Primordial lightning was only a third-order Tao technique. The next level was Heaven's primordial lightning. Bai Xiaowen had not mastered it. But at this moment, he seemed to have a trace of inspiration. Heaven's primordial lightning had to draw on the energy of heaven and earth and arouse the power of heaven and earth. Then, he had to do his best to make primordial lightning conform to the characteristics of lightning itself. It was at this moment that Bai Xiaowen comprehended the key points of Heaven's primordial lightning and officially mastered this fourth-order Tao technique. It was also because Bai Xiaowen did not spend too much time on it. Otherwise, he would have mastered Heaven's primordial lightning earlier. Bai Xiaowen began to form hand seals. Surging lightning energy jumped between his hands. As the hand seals formed, the sky above the bone-melting territory gradually darkened. Dark clouds gathered and a faintly discernible lightning vortex gradually formed. So slow. Bai Xiaowen sighed. The channeling time for a big move like Heaven's primordial lightning was too long. The consumption of spiritual energy was also huge. It could only be used in war. Seeing this terrifying power, the army of Heaven's mansion was stunned. It was as if a large stone was pressing down on their hearts. It was so heavy that they could not breathe. Tut! With a shout, a figure flew over. A cold light arrived first, and a dense sword aura was aimed directly at Bai Xiaowen's throat. Xia Jincheng was worthy of being called a top expert of the Great Yan territory. He easily forced back the two fiend lords who were fighting with him. He directly went to Bai Xiaowen to interfere with Bai Xiaowen's spell casting. In fact, before Xia Jincheng made his move, the support-type youth had already thrown out a counterspell from afar. The principle of counterspell was to disrupt the circulation of spiritual energy of the opponent and interrupt the channeling time of the spell. At the same time, the opponent would fall into a temporary state of spiritual energy disorder. However, Bai Xiaowen's level of true inner force was extremely high. Sitting on the silver throne, his protective spiritual energy was also extremely thick. Counterspell did not affect him at all, so Xia Jincheng rushed over to stop him. Chapter 1788. Bai Xiaowen could rely on his powerful protective spiritual energy to ignore Xia Jincheng's sword, but blind arrogance was not his style. Sitting on the silver throne gave him a level 10 boost in spiritual energy. Combined with Bai Xiaowen's true inner force, which was comparable to a level 17 king, he had the qualifications to ignore Lord-class attacks. Just now, his protective spiritual energy had successfully blocked the close-range assassination of the second assassin of the Starlink Association, Qi Zheng. However, Bai Xiaowen would not underestimate any enemy. Especially now that he had poured a large amount of true inner force into the sky lightning, which would weaken the strength of his protective spiritual energy. This was also a fact. Bai Xiaowen's mind moved, and the silver throne floated back. At the same time, light flashed, and three stalwart figures led a large group of summoned creatures to stand between him and Xia Jincheng. The Butcher, Abaddon, and a dark resurrected demon lord were in the lead. Behind them were a large group of elite and leader-class summoned creatures such as the Necrobone archers. Xia Jincheng cursed, "Bastard." Only then did he remember that Bai Xiaowen's previous life was a summoner. Strictly speaking, these powerful summoned creatures were his true profession. However, Bai Xiaowen had just killed Qi Zheng, causing Xia Jincheng to think that he was a magic lord and forget his true profession as a summoner. Therefore, when Xia Jincheng cursed, the meaning behind the word bastard was very bitter. It was probably similar to Qi Zheng's previous thoughts. How could a summoner have such powerful physical combat ability? It was simply cheating. With this delay, Bai Xiaowen's sky lightning finally fell. In the sky, in the eye of the vortex of dark clouds, a blinding lightning bolt as thick as a bucket suddenly fell. When the lightning struck down, it quickly split into two into four. It was really similar to the appearance of lightning seen in the natural world. The ends turned into countless tiny lightning bolts that filled the battlefield where the Heavenly Mansion army was. Bastard. Surrounded by the Sky Mansion army, the King of Pride, Alleganti, grumbled in the demon language. She was also very unlucky to be in the range of the sky lightning. However, Alleganti did not escape. Despite her complaints, she still dutifully cast a large area of effect control spell, Devil's Cage. Countless evil flaming bone claws extended from the ground, preventing the Heavenly Province army from escaping in all directions, helping Bai Xiaowen deal the most damage with his heavenly origin lightning. The heavenly primordial lightning striking Alleganti was something that couldn't be helped. Bai Xiaowen had control of spiritual power and could cast an area of effect attack spell. Originally, he could have avoided the small area where Alleganti was. Before he used the Sky Thunder, Bai Xiaowen also believed this. However, Bai Xiaowen only felt that something was amiss after he used the Sky Original Lightning. The Sky Original Lightning relied on his true core force to activate it, but it drew upon the power of heaven and earth. Bai Xiaowen could only specify the area where the heavenly primary lightning would strike, but he could not precisely control the distribution of the heavenly primary lightning's destructive power. Bai Xiaowen originally did not want to strike Alleganti. After all, she was the #1 fighter of the White Phoenix territory. However, what was done was done. Although the heavenly essence lightning was powerful, it was an area of effect attack after all. When it landed on the targets in the area, the damage was not exaggerated. It was equivalent to each person taking one of Bai Xiaowen's heavenly essence lightning. Of course, Alleganti was 5 meters tall, so she would definitely take more of the lightning's damage. Moreover, the Sky Original Lightning's evil destroying effect would also deal additional damage to her. However, she was still a high-level king. Taking the Sky Original Lightning head-on was not a big deal. It was just that her appearance was a bit miserable, and her snake hair was charred black. Alleganti could take it, but the Heavenly Province army was different. In the area covered by the Sky Original Lightning, a large number of elite soldiers and below were directly carbonized and turned to ash. Some of the unlucky leaders and heroic evolvers were also directly killed by the Sky Original Lightning. A few of the stronger leaders and evolved heroes managed to escape with their lives from the power of the Sky Lightning, but they were also heavily injured. Mengchuan was the only one who survived the Sky Original Lightning's bombardment without being heavily injured. However, his health had dropped by 30%. His armor was tattered, and half of his body was charred black. He had suffered heavy injuries. Although he had survived, Mengchuan's heart was bleeding. It's over, it's all over. This Sky Original Lightning had killed 400 to 500 people in the Heavenly Province army, and dozens of heroic evolvers were heavily injured. It was unrealistic to think that the remaining half of the army could contend against the high-level Demon King. As for the other side of the battlefield, the Great Yin Territory's experts were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. They were suppressed by the 13 demon lords and could only bitterly hold on. Mengchuan had been counting on Xia Jincheng and Qi Zheng, 2 top-tier experts, to hold up the fort. However, Qi Zheng had been easily killed by LV Wang, and Xia Jincheng had also been surrounded by summoned creatures. His fate was probably not much better than Qi Zheng's. Mengchuan felt despair as he looked at the King of Pride, Alleganti. Fortunately, he had been careful and left the newly developed demon army in the Heavenly Province territory. He did not participate in this battle. The reason he had done so was because Mengchuan had guessed part of Bai Xiaowen's strategy in the Dark Age plane through various means. He was worried that the demon army would be counterproductive in front of Bai Xiaowen. After all, the loyalty of the demon army could not be guaranteed. Now, it seemed that this was indeed the case. Given the nature of the demons to obey the strong, the moment they saw the King of Pride, Alleganti, they would probably change sides. Run. This time, he had underestimated LV Wang's strength, and he had already suffered a great loss. It was already a great fortune that he was still useful. Mengchuan immediately chose to run. Since he was within the range of the Twisting Bone Territory's Great Formation, and one of the basic functions of the territory's Great Formation was to reject teleportation tools or spells, the interplanar teleportation gate was the only exception. Since Meng Chuan could not use any teleportation tools to escape, he could only circulate his spiritual energy and fly towards the sky. The crack in the protective barrier was still there, so Meng Chuan escaped from the crack and returned through the interplanar gate. As for the experts of the Great Yan territory, he could not care less. Bai Xiaowen immediately saw Meng Chuan's movement to escape. "Aliganti, chase after him. It's best if he survives," Bai Xiaowen ordered. The King of Pride no longer needed to participate in this battle. Capturing Meng Chuan was the most important thing. At this time, Aliganti was also a little nervous. She had just called Bai Xiaowen a bastard. At the time, she didn't think much of it, but now she was a little scared. She was determined to endure hardships and learn the way of becoming stronger from Christos. In the end, she would be able to counterattack and reach the peak of the demon race. How could she not be able to control herself and reveal her true feelings? Fortunately, Bai Xiaowen did not intend to pursue the matter. Aliganti was relieved. She quickly flew and chased after Meng Chuan. She was determined to capture this bastard and redeem herself. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.